Now, out of all the things you could be doing tonight, this would be the last. I went to Pepper's Ferry the other day. I was so worried about what could happen. I said, well, I'll make sure I go.
David, will you check your mic?
Yep. Is it coming in?
Yeah.
It's definitely over the speaker, so you're showing it on.
I'm going to let you go ahead and start, and then I'm going to walk outside while you...
Okay.
And if it doesn't,
Okay. If it doesn't, I'll move.
Everybody ready? Good evening and welcome to our budget presentation for fiscal year 2024-25. We've been working on this thing for months and months, and lots of people have been a part of this. David, the floor is all yours, my friend.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. This is always that exciting time of year where I get to present the budget to you. So we have been talking about the budget for a good bit of time now, probably more so than we ever have. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. No real speech on this. I apologize 1,000 times over. This is probably going to be my longest budget presentation. There's so much to go over. It's about 110 slides, so we'll try to take some breaks during the course of it. I've been involved in government for 40 years, and throughout that period of time, I would say there's a lot of different things that you see, and every time I always tell everybody that I've seen everything, and then something new comes along. So, that's been kind of the way with a number of things. I would have never thought that we would get to a point where the world would shut down for a pandemic, that we would get to the point that inflation and the cost of goods and the price of wages and all those kinds of things would be that influential on a small community like Radford. You see it in big cities, and it's affected everybody. So the municipal governments have had a lot of strain on them. Radford's not the only one, just because of everything that's happened, the cost of hiring, the cost of materials, the time it takes for materials to come in, the extremely unusual times that we had. Because you all will recall, for a couple of years there, businesses were idled, schools were idled, we had closures all over the place. We were trying to make the best of all the things that we could have and keep going. And we did pretty well through the pandemic. Our response has been happening later on. It was a delayed response, and that's happening with a lot of small communities where you're readjusting now to for us, a smaller population at the university that calls Radford home. The cost of goods and services that every time we bid out something, it ends up being 20, 30, 40% more than it has been in the past. Those kind of things make things different for us, and the way we're having to rethink and reimagine, all that we do. So, from that perspective, I would say things are different. I know me, a number of other managers, that's usually the first thing they do is get up and say, well, every budget's different. And I'm not going to really say that about this one, because I feel like what we've seen in the past, what we know today, and what we know going forward, I think it's going to be fairly predictable. We've got a lot of things we're watching closely. Every day, Calista and I are looking at numbers, have been for a long time. As you all know, that's been one of the things ever since I've been manager, watching the numbers and being sure we were as conservative as possible. During that period of time, we made a conscious effort. When the coronavirus and the pandemic hit, nobody knew how to react. It was generated from health issues, requirements that were placed upon us that we didn't have any control of. So watching and seeing how those pieces would work has been important to us as we've gone forward and been part of how we've reacted moving on. So, while we started out that way, now we've got the delayed part of it. It's as people are getting started back up. We've got some real positive things that you're going to see through some of our numbers going forward. I feel pretty good about where we are. It's been a tough year. I think we've got another 6 months that's going to be tight on us, and then we're going to be able to move forward. A lot of issues, things we've talked about. This has not been the budget was in error, or we made mistakes in calculations. It has not been that kind of thing. The problem that we have had has been mostly just the cash flow. The cash flow has been so tight where revenues and expenditures, whether it's been the ability for folks to be able to pay, whether it's been something that's closed or hasn't been able to produce as it has, for it to be on the expense side, things that we don't have any control over. And that is one thing that's probably different about all of this, is probably 80% of everything we haven't had any control over. I mean, we just haven't been able to control what the costs of things are. And we tried to make it easier, so we didn't raise rates, we didn't raise anything that was going to be an expense to our citizens, except for what was done absolutely for the schools to make debt service. But we did hold back on our rates and things like that to try not to impact citizens, knowing some were working from home, some were idled while they were waiting to get back to work. So all of those things kind of come into play a little bit. And then 2 years into it, localities were thrown a rescue net with the different federal programs, whether it was the ARPA funding, American Relief Package, or whether it was the CARES Act, which was the coronavirus relief package. Those came in to help us in trying to get through the times. The problem with it is that you weren't free to use it for whatever you wanted to. So we couldn't put it in our reserves. We couldn't use it for things we wanted. It had to be specific things. It had to go to health care. It had to go to public safety. It had to go to economic development functions. So we did have community folks that were able to get some advantage out of that and helped our economy a whole lot, that were able to go through some of the programs that were done through the EDA and supported by the city. So those were really, really good, positive activities that I think really helped us in getting through that period of time and turning the curb on it. So with that, that's a little bit of background to get us led up and ready to start talking about the budget for the upcoming year. We have had a number, as I said, we've had a number of different, did I do something? Or to get tired? Hold on. Like I say, please ask me questions. I think I have every possible thing I can think of, I think is in this PowerPoint presentation. There we go. So kind of 4 areas we're going to cover. Go over the kind of the budget background, a little bit about, it should be 2024 budget background, some of the budget considerations, the things that are most important as we make decisions about the budget coming up, and then I'll take each budget by fund and then give you a summary at the end. I just love this picture. Found it in some of my research work, budget cuts. We've had to scale down our first line of defense. So the dog dresses airplanes. I just thought it was cute. One of the things, usually I'm looking for a saying or something like that, and this just seemed like it was perfect. Applies to a lot of different things. So just something fun at the beginning. So a little bit about our budget, a little bit about the background. So in talking about the things I've seen, 40 years I've been involved in government and trying to see the different pieces of it. 20 of that 40 years I was involved in building my own budget to submit to the manager during that time in whatever position I was in over those years. And then in the last 20 years been involved in the actual budget development. Everything kind of goes in cycles, and you will recognize this cycle. Tom will recognize this as well. We had incredible growth, use of our utilities when the foundry was in operation, and that was up until 2013. Everything was growing strong. Foundry closed. We dropped off. We were trying to refoot and retool and figure out what the next thing that we were going to do that was best. We dropped down into about $1 million. And then things started recovering. The economy was doing well. We got the reserves back up to nearly $3 million, and then that little recession kind of hit, and then immediately behind that is when COVID came in. So we used reserves to help us and help the community to continue to move along. And in looking and thinking about what reserves are, even though we were at the minimum reserve amount as required, it doesn't take long to go through $1 million when you've got a really, really tight economy. So you can see those recent years. These are all audited numbers. Just a reminder, those were unrestricted funds. These are your restricted funds. A larger pool. The stuff on the right does not total up, so don't pay any attention to that part of it. But I wanted you to have a general idea The non-spendable is like grants and things like that. The restricted funds are the police programs, fire programs, courtroom security, the opioid settlement. Anything that comes in that has to be spent for a specific purpose is over in that restricted account. The committed funds are like our DMV funds and library fees, things like that come in. We got about $2.2, almost $2.3 million in those restricted fund balance. Mentioned earlier, everything that's gone into the development of this budget. Y'all have had more meetings. We started, well, we almost start when this budget will be done. We already got our audit letter starting audit here in just a few days. So we start from one session into another. So you got your audit presentation back in January, and I presented kind of an overview of expectations as we were coming forward. I usually do another little thing about the what we're going to see, and I've kind of combined that into this as we've talked along. Then we got a number of work sessions. These are all on there. Y'all can talk about which ones you want to keep after tonight and which ones may not be necessary, but a lot of different input sessions as we've gone through this budget. So in looking at the numbers, that's one of the biggest things. The budget for this year is 73, like I say, it's 24. The budget for the current year is $73 million. The property tax values, $910 million. The non-taxable, $724. And I keep mentioning the non-taxable because that is so important for our community, because almost half, and that amount is actually closer as we get the new reassessment, is non-taxable. So that's a lot of property that's on the books that we're not able to tax. But looking at building permits, we had 301 building permits for $14 million in 23, and in 22, 270 permits for $11 million. So a lot of good activity occurring in the latter part of the pandemic as we pulled away from that. Started in 20, went through 21, and partially into 22. Population is 16.4. Talk a little bit about population a little bit later on. University enrollment, the numbers are up. These are the ones they're showing that I guess are in class and all that. I think we're in person closer to probably that 5,500, 6,000 students. And then inflation, I think this is a big number. And everywhere I've researched this, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, the National Chamber of Commerce, the state, or whether it's been through the Federal Reserve, 15 to 18% has been the inflation rate over a 2-year period of time. So while it's been in that 3% in the last little bit, it's that long-term inflation that's been really causing us the issues. Our unemployment is down. It was really high during the pandemic. We're just under the national average. And then the interest rates were raised 11 times. They're affecting home buying and things like that at 7.6%.
Before you go on real quick, and maybe I'm confused, this is current year, because this is not the new assessed value, and that's the current budget we're in.
Correct. This is all, yeah, I'm sorry, I should say 24. This is all the stuff that we're, yeah, it's 25 is what we're looking at budget-wise, but it is the 24 numbers.
Budget numbers that we're talking about. I just wanted to clarify.
So in looking at all the things, just a recap of the things that you were really held back on spending this past year. We cut a lot when we got into concerns over cash flow, but you had some inexpensive things that carried into the fiscal year from the past 2 years with completion of a number of projects, arrival of some equipment, but I'm not going to read all these, but you can see the bigger ones, SCADA system improvements, which are going to be really important. Number of awards. Y'all have done 18 resolutions and proclamations this year. We got through the real estate reassessment. 10 special events and concerts. People are coming to Radford for those concerts and events, so that's a good thing. We generated 2.2 million kilowatt hours through the hydro, and then all of the park improvements. The pickleball courts at Bissett Park, I would have never thought they would be used like they are, and folks are down there all the way up till 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. In fact, they're getting so much wear, I'm going to have to look at some resurfacing issues that we had not planned on. So the good and the bad with that, and of course your ACE support, and then still continuing the planning on East Main Street and the planning for the water trail.
What is I'm going to say the SCADA?
The SCADA system is it's the brains, it's the master computer system that oversees the electric system at the electric department. So if a transformer or substation goes down, it lights up and sends a message out to all of the corresponding iPhones, iPads, telephones to let the department know. That's how we are able to get out so fast, while a lot of times people are
use
still
our
calling
digger.
in.
Our
But we
digger.
know, yeah, we know about it quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, so what went into the development of the 25 budget? You know, we continue to want to minimize our impact on our citizens and businesses. That's been hallmark for more than a decade. We want to be realistic about our revenue projections, assume reasonable future economic conditions, maintain that high quality level of service. People expect that, and we don't get complaints. That's a good thing. We try to do our very best in making sure that our services are top-notch all the way around, even custom in some cases. We're paying for all the services we receive from outside agencies. We want to grow that path for our community and what is sustainable for our community, and that sustainability is the new word that you're seeing in this, because we've got to make sure that we're able to carry this out long term. We want to preserve the financial health of the city, reflect the expenses accurately, and that reasonable size of government, which we do a lot with the small government that we have. We have 10 folks in administration that cover, well, I think Melissa's got 5 hats now, but everybody's wearing a lot of different hats and covering a lot of different things, but we're able to do it and do it successfully. We want to advance that quality of life, stabilize, restore, and grow those reserve funds back. They added some words to this, and then adjust to the new normal. Nothing's going to be like it was 3-4 years ago. So we've got to see how that piece of it works for our community. So what all goes into the budget considerations? You know, that new normal we talked about, what our community needs and services are. We're always watching that, however we get that message back, through you all, through text message, through social media, phone calls, however it comes in, we try to make sure that those services and needs are met at all times. Watching state and federal allocations and mandates, that's probably been a little trickier. Some things are slower in getting paid than they have been in the past as far as receipts go, coming back to the community, so we have to stay on that all the time, and then just being sure that those revenue pieces come in. And in case I forget while it's on my mind now, the governor did not sign the minimum wage increase, so wherever that goes from here, we had that included, so just know that in case I forget it when I get further over into the slide development. Weather conditions, derechos, I send you all something on the weather, it seems like every couple of weeks. So that's a big thing. We're watching wind and water and all that can affect and cause conditions to change. Our utility sales trends, all the personnel costs, just our overall operations, equipment replacement, and then those real estate valuations and sales, the customer base, you know, whether it's university enrollment or just the growth of our community. Our capital improvements, trends, like I say, I'm not going to read all these, school support. The rebound of the economy, I think, is one of the biggest things we're keeping an eye on now, is watching to see how we've had a couple of closings that have occurred. We're optimistic those could fill and have futures for very soon, so we'll keep our fingers crossed. They're in good locations. They're going to be pushed out nationally, so I think we're really hopeful that those are going to work out pretty good, and they have not been a substantial issue with our utilities and things like that at this point. The private investment piece of all of this, whether it's in building permits, looking at our community, we've got a huge private investment deal going on now with a number of different things, more buildings being renovated or new construction, new planning, new projects coming on the books. The other thing we've been paid on a lot of attention to is not so much the budget activity, while that's a part of it, but looking at our audited numbers. So we're going back 5 years, looking at what our trends are in audit, because they can kind of tell your story in those jump ups that we've had in the last, well, particularly in this last audit. And then products and labor availability.
Quick question, David. With the minimum wage savings, I know we kind of backfilled the budget with that money, assuming that there was a good chance that might pass. If it doesn't pass, what kind of savings now?
Not much. It was only a few cents. In most cases, we've been doing pretty good with our minimum wage, so it's not a significant savings.
Okay.
It was only 27 positions, I think it was. Yeah, 27 positions was affected anyway, and that's part-time positions as well.
Do you have just a guess on what you're talking, 10,000, 5,000?
Is anything ringing a bell with you, Dawn?
It was about it was about
It's less than
$1.
$15,000, I'm
I
pretty
was
sure.
gonna say
Wouldn't you say?
$12,000 would make sense.
Yeah.
Because
So-
it's about $1 an hour, and you figure 12 to 1,500 hours a person, and you go from there.
Yeah, the big cuts were the positions we eliminated from the budget, which is that $1,200,000 that we pulled out. What kinds of things will impact the budget? When you're thinking about all the things that you're trying to do in your budget, when you're thinking about all the things that are going on in the community and what our numbers look like, then what other things are going to be part of your budget, either required or something that you need to keep in mind? Those revenue sources, that's our number one thing, is watching what those are doing and where they're going. Those property tax valuations, our utility sales, top three things for us. And then followed by that, you start looking at the expense side. Radford University, both how many students are here that are renting apartments, because that's, we know we're down on the apartments, which is affecting the utilities significantly, and there's not as many students here that are spending money in our stores. So the enrollment online and on campus is important to watch. The construction that goes on in the university, there's been a lot of construction there, and that's kind of slowing down. I think most things now are going to be just improvements to the inside the buildings themselves, and not anything new and big like what we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years. What special events they have that can bring people to our community that will spend money in our restaurants and in our businesses. That supports the schools, the fund transfers, cost and product availability, and then all the cost of services, whether it's our regional affiliations, things that we provide, those human services programs, as Jesse knows, those are growing like crazy, and it's just part and parcel for needs that are not just in Radford but everywhere. And then our employee costs, and then looking at that big economic picture, sales, mills, lodging, unemployment, private investment, consumer spending, housing growth, population. And then, those things I mentioned earlier on, there's other influences, wage rates, inflation, anything from outside, the availability of products and materials all go into the development of the budget.
Another quick question on, with us having not as many students here from RU, are we finding that the rentals are remaining unrented, or are we bringing in a new population to our community that maybe we didn't have in abundance? Because I know I've worked with people, and finding rentals here still seems to be really pretty challenging.
Yeah, the rental, if you're going in the university area, you can find some rentals there, some 5 and 6 bedroom that are now got 3 and 4 students in them, from what we understand. There are locations in buildings that aren't full. Don't have a number on that, but we do know that that's the case just by watching our own revenue projections for what's coming in and utility bills. So an apartment that had 6 in it that now may have 3 in it is probably not burning the utilities that it did once upon a time, and we've only spot checked those to be sure that that was the case. But as a general statement, that is generally true.
Well, I was just going to say from personal experience too, we have 2 rentals within a block and a half of RU, and the first 5 years it was all students, and in the last 5 years it's been families and other residents filling that void, which I've noticed in the last, I'd say 4 years probably.
Yeah, I think there are more families living in the area now. You see more young people pushing strollers and things like that. So there is some of the housing that had gone student oriented. There's some transition to that back. I know we've had some exciting redevelopment type things where people have been turning units back into single-family residential, which is really good, and they're making that investment, which helps push the values of everything up.
All mine are families as well. I haven't had one student apply for anything, and I've rented several recently, so.
And they dominated, when there was 9,000 to 10,000 students, they dominated most of the rental market. So just going back to some numbers, so these are current numbers. So I think this is interesting. Our population has gone up. It was down to 14,000 there during the pandemic. The 20 census, we were at 17,000. We dropped from that through to about 13,800, I think was our number during the pandemic period. The new estimate for '23 pushed us back up to 16,499, and then our newest population from the Weldon Cooper Center is 16,854. So that's encouraging too, because that number plays into grants, that number plays into the rental income, rental opportunities, purchasing, spending in our community, those kinds of things. Average household income, 60,000. Median household, I didn't find the newest one. That one is probably about 8 months old, 44,000. I think it's up to 48, but I couldn't find the number to verify that. Median home value, 238, and then median age we know is 23.6. And then just a recap on the rates and taxes. We have a 84-cent rate now. It went up 10 cents from 20 to 22. That wasn't 10 cents total. That was cumulative over those few years, and that was all school construction. We haven't raised the real estate tax for any general fund improvement other than school construction in at least a decade or more. Personal property's been level since 2011, pretty competitive with everybody else. Nobody else has really pushed that up much. We have a small small increase in the electric base rate at 1.5% in 2019, and that WPCA is that one that's jumped up a few times. It got us this flat. We went for a long period of time, and then it jumped up in January of this past year, 2023, and then jumped up again in June, which we did as a pass-through for the current year's budget. And then it's going up again, which is part of this budget presentation a little bit later on. Water and sewer both went up, mostly because of cost of treatment and things like that. And sanitation's been pretty level since 2019. We're limited 9.63 square miles. We've got to make the best advantage of that area that we can. We've got some good revenue sharing agreements with our neighboring jurisdictions. As I mentioned to you all a little while back, Montgomery County no longer is sharing water with us. They went off the water agreement a couple of months ago. You'll see some drop in that in the budget projection, and it'll drop even more because we did get more than a half a year revenue out of that. We still will have the water that flows through the sewer lines. We do have a fee that's on that. We'll still be collecting that from Montgomery County.
David, will you explain that and the history of that agreement? Because I think a lot of people are confused that this is something new, but it's really something that occurred many, many, many years ago.
Yeah, back, it was an annexation. Tom, do you remember what year was that? Was it 84? Does that sound right? Back in 84, there was an annexation that we were looking to annex all the way to the interstate. County and city came together and decided to do this revenue sharing area, which included joint planning and all those kinds of things. The Radford Community Hospital that was in Radford was looking to exit Radford at the time and go out into a larger area. That was what precipitated a lot of the agreement. They were going to go on land between here and the interstate and ended up going across the interstate. But still, the agreement moved forward because we needed that provision of all the utilities to be able to supply the truck centers that are out there now, the antique shop, and of course the things that are there around the hospital itself. So all those things were part of the agreement. And from the beginning, it always said that they would eventually have their own system. And part of their agreement with the New River Valley Water Authority, I think is the name of it. That's Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Montgomery County. Their agreement says that they have to join in and they cannot buy outside water sources. So they've been moving with a number of capital improvements. The big one that tied this in was one that went from Plum Creek over to Tyler Avenue to pick up the water on that side. And that, like I say, that just ended in the last couple of months. They've been talking about it for a number of years, but just really finally got the capital improvements. I think a lot of the contracts and things ran higher, but is that generally what you're looking for? That's what
you know, part of the commentary
it was to develop that area. Then we shared taxes and we shared revenues that came in from that. Still a lot of good revenues, and that part of it will still stay the same.
Part of the commentary that was out there earlier this year was that this was something new that had just occurred, but it's decades in the making that nobody that has served in 20 years could have changed based on the agreement from the 80s. Correct?
Yeah, and the one with Pulaski goes back further than that. I think
Right,
that was in the
70s.
late 70s.
Just wanted to confirm that.
Just kind of a long history there. Everything in red is where increases occurred. Starred on the real estate tax reassessment in 2016. The rate was, because reassessment the property tax value didn't change a whole lot, it still stayed at 76 cents, so that's what's driving, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's what drives that complicated view of assessment and values. And then 2020, we did go up on the rate, and 2020 was a reassessment year, so the rate was the same. It dropped to 78 cents in 21, but did jump up. That's where it gets complicated in the school construction piece of it that brought that 10 cents on during that period of time. You can see personal property stayed the same, and then machinery and tools also stayed the same. Only a few changes in the enterprise history. You can see just small $2 increases over on the sanitation side that occurred in 2016, 2018, 2020, and then we've been flat ever since. Water side, we had an increase in 2015 from 1432 to 1632, and then we went up in 2024 to 2032. Same thing on wastewater, same 2 years affected. And then really the only thing that was driving besides the 2019 base power rate has been that WPCA for electric. These are your new numbers. 1 cent increase in taxes brings you about $119,000, $120,000 roughly. Electric, about a 1% increase is a little over $200,000. Water's 49 and solid waste is 42. And then just the budget components that are important in this. The general fund has got the most activity in it as far as services go. We'll talk a little bit about the details later. The enterprise operations, the 3 of those in the special funds. So the budget components, pretty much, electric and the general fund are your 2 biggest pieces. And what drives the cost and the size of the electric fund is your purchase power that we'll get into more details. General fund, public safety, recreation, things like that, followed by water and transit. So that's the pieces looking forward. So 2025 budget. Any questions about the history? It's hard to cover 10 years of stuff in about 30 minutes. So I'm going to try to stay close on schedule as possible. So 2025 budget. So here we go. General fund first. General fund is $35,411,361. The things that go into the general fund: city administration, information technology, community development, public safety, social services, educational support, court systems, leisure services, and all of the agencies that we have. The general fund makeup is property taxes and those transfers. And that's that transfer from the electric fund over, that's about 18%. And then the intergovernmental, which covers all your state funding, and then those other local taxes. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the real estate tax. So the new real estate reassessment valuation for Radford was $1,196,688. So that is a huge, huge number for us to jump up from the $910 million you saw a little bit ago. So the non-taxable 45%, taxable 55%, for a total valuation of $2.1 billion. So that's the 2024 calendar year increase is 31% over 2023. And that's what's driving the advertising, the real estate rate, and the details of that we'll be talking about here in just a little bit. So when you're looking at what we currently have tax-wise, we're at 84 cents, and our tax rate is set on the calendar year. So what you do now affects the June and December payments for current year. The assessment, as I mentioned earlier, went from 82 cents to 78 cents. That was a reassessment, and a 4 cent added on there for McCarg debt service. And then we went up another 6 cents in 21. That was that other part, because McCarg got started. Y'all wanted to plan early and do part of it 1 year and part the next. That's the reason that increase happened over 2 years rather than one, for that total of So when we're looking at the numbers, I spent a lot of time analyzing and evaluating and looking at and reevaluating and checking again and going to audit. There's some positive things. Our total property tax growth from 20 to 23 was 21.9%. That's a pretty good sized jump. And that's total property. That's the bottom line. That's not real estate. It's all of it together. Just these numbers, selected numbers that have come out there. But you could see across the board, look at the increases that we've had. So there is investment going on. I think the positive thing from these revenue numbers is to show that investment in our community. I can't think of anything worse than having your tax assessments be going neutral or the other way, or seeing your numbers appear in any of these categories, dropping down. As long as those are growing, that means you've got private investment, you've got jobs, particularly looking at machinery and tools, furniture and fixtures, aspects of that. So those are good, positive numbers for us. When you look at those other taxes, those other local taxes, this is the next big area in that pie that you saw earlier. So sales tax, look at what our sales tax is doing. $2 million. I mean, we're really doing well. It's got some big jumps coming. These are based on what we've been seeing in the audit increases. You can look down through that list. Hotels going up. That was only a partial year for hotel tax with the new hotel on there. Meals tax doing really good. Our charges for services have been stable. So the sales tax increase has been 41% from 20 to 23. And the meals tax, 42% from 20 to 23, and hotel has been almost 90% from 20 to 23. But we've had new offerings come online that have helped that hotel piece. Plus, when you look at the other things that go on, Airbnbs, other people come into the community, and that kind of thing. The other piece of revenue then is the state categorical aid. The state categorical aid, PPTRA, communication tax, auto rental tax, all falls into that non-categorical state aid. Some decent jumps in that, but they have not kept up with what the expenses are in some of these areas. Those shared expenses are constitutional office areas. State aid is the 599 funding, which has had some pretty good-sized jumps in it in the last year, which has been a good thing. DSS administration, the CSA, library aid, and then finally the DSS grants is that number 4, and then of course those transfers. You can see we were trying really hard. We were down to, in 20, we were down to 2.7. My goal was to try to get to $2 million in the transfer, and we were getting really close to that. I think the year before that it was slightly under that. It stayed fairly stable. Coronavirus came to us, and after other declines in some of the revenues and the increase, not so much the declines in the revenue, but the increases that were associated with the expense side, that number has gone back up. It was the highest in 2023 at $4 million. This year it looks like we'll be able to hit the 3.6 and then 3.9 for the time being there. We will only do the transfer based on what revenues we see once we get into the audit piece. Just as an aside, when you see these in your budget, the revenue sharing piece that we talked about earlier, a lot of that is what you're seeing coming from Pulaski County. That's everything from the bridge to Hardee's, back over to Northside Forest, back over to the Rural King. And then payment in lieu is the payment that all funds make back to the general fund for our service operations. It's for accounting, it's for the treasurer's office, it's for any kind of planning, administrative types of things. That's that each department, you'll see that in each one of the departments. That's a comma there, 9.15 comma 703.
Hey, David, that's quite a jump in the revenue sharing from, I guess, 23 to 24. Is that, I know that there's been a lot of growth when you talk about Starbucks and things like that. Is that what you're basing those projections off of?
Yes, and that's coming off of what our actuals are looking like now, because we're looking at, we pulled the most recent information we could a couple of weeks ago. Right. So that's probably through, what, February-ish time frame maybe? So based on those months going forward, Rural King does super. There's some expansion that was happening at Kroger. We got, 3 new businesses that are there, with the Long John Silver coming back online, and the, do what?
Bojangles back.
But, yeah, Bojangles back. So all of those are contributing and will add to that number. This is probably a little conservative, maybe better than that next year.
Well, and
Now, that's not all, that is Both Montgomery County and Pulaski County. So that's everything from the Food City out to the interstate as well.
And I don't want to be Debbie Downer and point it out, but some of this we're helped with some of our numbers because of inflation, where something that used to cost $5 is $7, we get a percentage of that. Now, the numbers are better, which is great, all the way across the board, but that's also, inflation's one of those buzzwords for us, unfortunately. It's hitting us everywhere. But that's one way inflation helps, if you want to say it that way, because the cost of goods and services are more, the percentage of tax will be a little bit higher on all of those. So I don't think it's an unrealistic number.
Taking a look at the general fund expenses, public safety, education, the biggest hunks of that, followed by the welfare, social service area, and then general administration. And then I wanted to break down a little bit. I know it's a lot of numbers here. It's mostly summaries and help me in presenting how we've got growth or how expenses are working out. You've got the individual numbers there in your budget books. Those budget books that you have, by the way, are the current ones minus the things that we've taken out. So it's everything as of last night at 5 o'clock. So just know that that's as current as we could possibly get. Look down, just call your attention to a couple of big things. Public safety. And when you go through and you're looking at, when you look at comparing budget to budget, and you say, well, gosh, the budget's increased. You look at the things that have increased. So many of the departments are less. You're talking about, we had department heads say, well, gosh, I'm kind of down to, how many legal pads and pens do I take out of my budget? There's just not a lot significant there. There is some conference education items that are still in place. The reason they're there is there are departments that have put off their certifications. We've got to have building officials with building certifications. We've got to have commissioners of revenue with the certifications that come from the state. So those are there so they can make sure they keep those and they're legal in what they do, and they're able to address all of the issues and questions that any of our citizens have and fill out paperwork and things like that. That's just 2 examples, but there are a lot of them. So when you're looking at that list, and then you see education piece that includes a number of it's the debt service, it's the contribution to the schools, and then also their capital. Let's see what else. Remember, a portion of the public works budget is over in the general fund. That's what that's the mowing the city parks. I cannot charge that off to VDOT. That was one of those big changes that happened last year or 2 years ago.
Is that why we went from 775 to 3.6 million?
Yes, yeah, because we had to move. Part of it was over in the public works area, and because of the way the public works funding comes in, it has to be on right of way. If it's on right of way and touching it, we're able to count it, but parks and things like that, even though it's the same crew, they're, in some cases, if they're mowing the park, it gets charged to general fund. If they're mowing out on Tyler Avenue, it gets charged over to public works.
With education, I know the 2 years of fiscal year 21 and 22 were McCard construction related. What is the jump from 23 to 24, 25 of $1.5 million? Goes from 6.
Debt service of McCard.
Okay. So what you're saying, though, is that we paid well, how did that work with the 12 million or so that are in the 2 years of?
It's the bond payment that came to us because it had to flow back to the city, and through auditing wise, it has to count as the city's before it went over to the schools.
Okay.
I still don't understand why it's going up. Don't we make payments, and when you make payments, it goes down? Why did it go up between 23 and 24 again?
23 and 24
64 to 78.
went up for, let's see, is that when the bond payment started up, Callista? Because see, we got the bond money and then the payment didn't start for another year. So that may be why. I'll check into that for you.
Yeah,
I'm trying, that's not ringing a bell.
I'm not understanding how this is flowing. I get the 12 million or so that's added in those 2 years because that actually paid for the construction.
Let me get to the school slide and then I'll be able to.
Okay.
I have
Yeah.
one more
Oh,
question.
sorry.
I forgot what it is now.
While you're thinking, when you're looking at the general fund, again, the biggest areas you're looking at is your public safety, which is your fire and police. It also includes your public safety, the building the fire department's in, the building that the police department's in, includes the sheriff department, all of those. These are the general breakdowns, because this is that number, I want to make sure it's right, because this is that number that came from the audit. This is that grouping category. I don't build this number. That's why I want to make sure I answer the question right.
So the public, I remember my question. The public works number you said jumped from 22 to 23 because we had to take on so much more mowing, et cetera.
Correct. Because
So what did we do to get it down $2 million? Or that's a really big
That a cut in
low jump.
service?
Is that
Yeah.
a cut? Like, what did we do great right there?
No, so what happened is in 22, we were still able to charge off some of the funds over in the public works area
Yeah.
to this. So that's why
It went
they were
from
doing
23.
$3 million worth of work or whatever. Oh, let's see. Well, let's see. Public works. So the 3.6. I'm sorry. The 3.6 is for the bridge project is added in there. So that's it all.
okay.
I'm sorry.
Makes a lot more
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah.
It
It has to come to me. So. Yeah, so when the auditors are putting these categories together, it's not just, I'm sorry, yeah, it's not just, so when you're looking at these, it's not just the labor and the materials we have. There are also projects. So if the project qualified, let's say it's was an improvement to the municipal building, which that's in judicial administration, that you will call a couple of improvements, we repaved and we restriped, all of that would be in that judicial administration piece because it affects that building that's up there. So when you see those jumps, most of the jumps are almost always associated with a project or something along those lines. And some of those, while the ARPA funds weren't specific in areas, if it had something associated with leisure services, let's say, like the skateboard park, it would have gotten charged, it would have gotten credited to leisure services. Is that making more sense now?
Yeah, I was just saying,
Yeah, I'm
let's do
sorry.
whatever we did between 23 and 24 to cut the
Yeah.
mowing down.
Yeah, so.
Let's do that again.
Yeah,
But
the
it wasn't
mowing,
mowing.
but yeah, the mowing got pulled over and has increased because what we were charging for mowing over in Public Works now has, so over, when you see all the way to the right, the 1.3 million for Public Works is, I'm not remembering any projects for the upcoming year, so that's probably what it actually cost us to do all of the park mowing and weeding and any kind of repairs that we might do, things like that. Okay? Sorry about that. Yeah, took me a minute. I've looked at too many numbers now. So looking at some smaller breakdowns, information technology, probably one of the larger growth areas, and it's because of all the things that it takes after the pandemic to be sure that we are cyber safe from security breaches, things like that. It's equipment. Most of these are contract services that all the lines of communication that come into the city, all of those have a price that goes with them. Those community development agencies are just the ones that are community development only. It's not that bigger agency piece, so these are the ones that are tied to community development only.
So the IT, I know that we are moving to one accounting general ledger system this year. Is there going to be any additional fees or costs that you think might come up that we might incur since we're getting it done?
The only thing I know big that's happening right now has been the security checks that have gone along with the election fraud items. And then in the area of munis is just to be sure that we have security from any breaches that may end up being some kind of ransomware type thing.
Okay, but I mean, I know that we
But
needed
no, we
additional
don't-
training and stuff to make sure
Training
that
and all
everybody
is,
felt good
it's
about.
budgeted in, so there's not any
Okay.
big numbers.
Okay, so
Nothing
so
that's,
Munis is paid
yeah,
for
usually I
pretty
can ring a
much.
bell.
Just wondering.
So looking at this area, pretty much this is your bigger area that we talked about earlier, police, fire and rescue, and sheriff's department. This gives you an idea Note the increase, 2.9 million, 35% jump from 20 to 25. That's just because of all the new service, right? Jerry, everything that you all do, you're transporting people and staying with them and things like that. It's just a lot more services needed post-pandemic than it have been in the past, despite our community size.
Is that what you were looking at?
Yeah, and also that just overall, when you're looking at generally in a combination, juvenile has increased. It's that one we talked about. It's a 3-year running average, and we have been really, really low. And I think we had 4 offenders, I believe, that's bumping our number and our average back up. That's the reason it's jumped back up to $16,000.
Just 4? You're talking about 4 juveniles?
Yes, 4 increase of about 4.
So 4 bumps it up.
Yeah,
Eight.
it doesn't take much. Regional jail, another one to just kind of pay attention to. It bumps around a little bit, but one of the things that drug court and some of the judges have been doing is there was more stay-at-home types of things. Our numbers have been increasing. This is a conservative number at 750. I don't think it'll be over 750. It may be a little less than that, but we're still trying to keep that 750 number.
So one of the things with the jail I did want to point out that's a potential challenge for us, as we do things like drug court and the stay-at-home and all of that, there's
You think of
less
anything
per
else?
diem,
I'm
which is
missing anything.
typically how we've had to pay the bill for our folks. So that goes down, but then the needs for the jail are the same or higher. And so that's something we have to watch moving forward, because the overall cost of the jail is going to have to be funded in some way in addition to the per diem, or the per diem's going to go way up. I think it went way up. Didn't it increase this last year, the per diem for the jail? I think it did.
It did.
And that's just one of those things. It's both a good and a bad thing. We don't want as many people in jail, but if the jail is budgeted based on X number of people from Radford being in jail, then the cost has to be found somewhere. We can only save so much.
How's that agreement worded? Can they just pass that cost down to us on a non-per diem basis?
Yeah, and they've,
Yeah.
throughout the state, they've chased the state for those per diem reimbursements. It was supposed to be a higher percentage of state funds coming in.
Right.
And now it's based on, and Commonwealth Attorney and our police department and others have really worked hard to try to make sure that somebody that maybe had a Radford address wasn't getting charged to Radford. So they look through and watch all of those numbers very consistently to be sure that what is there are Radford arrests and they're Radford resident.
Speaking of that, I know we've talked about it a little bit, but with the decrease in student population, have we seen a decline in that per diem? I mean, typically you would think, whether it's a drunken public, whatever, more college students.
Jerry, as a
but-
whole, you got any theory on that? I don't know that I can say from what I see.
I think the biggest factor to look at is typical drunken public arrests and tell yourself, so we're talking. The actual jail bills for people that are incarcerated several weeks for.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, the things I see are that, and then also child support, things like that they haven't paid and have ended up picking up somebody for the weekend. So normally we would see our numbers drop in November, December through the holidays. We don't see that as much as we used to. So
The only
again, that's
reason
just a big number. Any numbers that approach $1 million for
Yeah.
me are big numbers.
The
So-
only reason I bring it up is the jail has to figure out its budget some way. And that's a big issue. And they've kind of been, telling us for a couple of years, hey, things are getting tight. It's a good thing that we're not putting as many people in jail from Radford, but that can bring its own set of challenges with still having to pay, so you do all these other things that cost money that keep people from maybe going to jail and doing those other things, but then you have the additional cost of still having to support the jail. And I just wanted to bring that up because that's something I know we're going to have to revisit at some point.
Well, and to piggyback on that, if you've not had a tour, I would highly recommend you go. You'll see that the building has some immediate needs in regards to repair and some that they've been limping along. So I don't see that number going down. In fact, they have some things that are, I think, probably close to critical mass in regards to the infrastructure of that building that we might be seeing.
The only other thing on this side I would mention is fire rescue operations. The bump up that we've had there is we've got more of our EMS folks are getting those paramedic certificates, which is what we want, that highest level of care. Each run has to have a paramedic with it, and we've got more of those that have been coming on board as well. And nearly all of them have gone working on educational things that are bumping them up to advanced or whatever.
And the city pays for that
Yes.
certificate? Okay.
Leisure services, parks and recreation, bump arounds on parks and recreation are usually associated with the projects. It's been a fairly flat budget for the most part. We do have some growth cost expenses that are bumping it a little bit in the upcoming year, but for 24, most of that was the projects, the pickleball court, the skate park, the things that came online in 2024 early this year, that because most of those ribbon cuttings were in the summer of last year. Some of those expenses carried on over into the first part of this year. So when I seem blurry on things, it's because the most frustrating thing I think I've dealt with is stuff that we had ordered, had in budget, that we were buying in 2020, 21, that's just gotten deliveries on them. So trying to think was bought 3 years ago and 2 years ago, and what was covered in the pandemic and what was covered in regular budget, it all rolls together at one point. So trying to keep the years separated gets a little confusing. So library pretty much do a great job with the state aid that they get. You saw that on previous slides on the revenue side. Elizabeth does a super job with that, and every dime that they spend with state aid money has to be used for the things that the state aid check marks. I think there was like a $15 difference in something last year, and we had to make sure that we went back and made sure that that item was, that we spent something for $15 to zero out, or it would cause us problems down the year for revenues.
Can you go back a slide? I just wanted to say, these are some of our top priorities for quality of life, but also for building the future economy for our community. And it's less than $2.5 million, maybe $3 million altogether, out of a $78 million budget. I just wanted to point that out, that, you know, we're getting a lot for that, and it certainly helps us. It's just challenging to try to make those all work on such a narrow amount.
Hey, David, go back to the last slide. The Glencoe. I'm just curious, why has it gone up so much since 2020?
Glad you mentioned that. So we have a contract with them. The contract's been pretty stable. It's had some bumps. Jesse, you may remember about $2,000 or something. Most of those, everything with Glencoe, we own the building. So we had some HVAC repairs up there, replacement. I don't know if you noticed or saw, the back fascia had rotted out. We replaced all of that. And when you're doing anything on a historic mansion, you have to pay big bucks. So we have to get specialists that know what they're doing. They have to meet the Department of Historic Resources criteria. They're going through that now. So when you've heard from Scott or Jesse talking about lifts to get you to the second floor or additions on the back, they have to meet that look and feel for the time period, plus when the Glencoe, the Wharton House was built. So yes, all those bump ups that you see were things. We did some repainting up there. The whole inside was repainted in 22, I think, and then that back porch had improvements on it in 23, and then last year, early part of this year, back last summer, is when we had several of the HVAC units went out. Am I remembering all those correct? Yeah, we did some window repairs as well. All of those, there's some plate glass over the windows to protect the artifacts inside, so those have to be removed. So it's a little more involved when you're actually trying to paint the windows of a historic building. Those windows are the original windows. The fascia's pretty much the original. I know they're trying to do a fundraiser to get the little cornices put back up in the soffits, and they're doing that as private fundraisers. They've done a lot on the private fundraiser side. So while we serve as fiscal agent on some grants, the money only passes through us and goes to the Heritage Foundation, and they do the expense item, except for when you look in the budget and you see Glencoe building itself, you'll see our costs, which is and we also include electricity, water, sewer, any kind of repairs and maintenance, the insurance services, those kinds of things. And then you see the Heritage Foundation contribution that you all make.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. I'm not going to say a whole lot here. You'll be able to see this in your budget book, only just to give you an idea. You can see what things bump up. Probably social services is probably one of the more challenging areas because it's based on services to people, and you never know what people you're going to have, how many you're going to have, foster care. Jesse, help me if I'm forgetting something. All of those mental health and services
Well,
that are
any
added.
of the alternative school environments.
Yeah, so you don't know today what you might have in 4 months. So you could have, we had CSA stuff at $300,000, $400,000, and then 1 year it exploded, and had like a $1.5 to $2 million bill at the end of the year because of the special services. You just can't plan far enough along or budget enough to know what that is. We tried to run it off auditing trends, but even the auditing trends were all over the place. So all you can do is do the best with a swipe number and assume that's what you're going to see from the state, because that is reimbursement. You all have 2% on some things, you have 10% on some things, you have 20% on some things. Keith does a super job up there of being sure that we keep
He does.
keeps us in the right category. If he has something that's in the wrong category, he calls Clifton and says, hey, I think if I move this here, I can get more money. And he does that. So
He
kudos.
very nicely runs a tight ship.
Yeah.
But he's very nice about it, but he runs a tight
Yeah.
ship. But I think you guys will probably remember I told you about one of the children that were in our care, and they had to be hospitalized, and that was running $50,000 a month, and there was no other agency that would take that child on because of some instability in health. So that, of course, we had no way of predicting, and that's a very large sum per month. And so you're sort of at the will of what's going on in our homes, honestly.
Is there a mechanism in place that if another situation, kind of like what Jesse was talking about, were to arise, that they relay that to you so that you can, so you're not at the end of the year just saying, oh gosh, this is.
They try to tell us as quick as they can. CPMT usually is also surprised when some of these things come along.
I'm on that one too, so yeah.
Yeah, so I know one, just in an instance, it's tough to explain all situations, but you may think you may be getting one foster child and ends up being 4 siblings or 5 siblings, so you've got to provide service. So what you think may be a $50,000 or $100,000 education or medications or things like that could become 2x, 3 times that amount, depending on what you get. It's hard to say. It's just no way to really know, but I will tell you it's run as efficiently as possible. They try to get any kind of state and federal monies that they can to chase that down and keep the minimum on us. But no, in the end, it could cost the city $1 million and has in the past, and we've had recent years where that's the case, and you have no choice about that. If you had probably a really, really big extenuating circumstance, I would say that's probably where you would want to make contact with our legislators, and Vicki does that as well, and so does the board, to say, hey, this is a big thing for us, help us out.
Yeah.
So
And I just wanted to point out, some of these things are unique to us being a city versus if we were a town, correct? We would not necessarily have all of the same expenditures within our social services if we were just operating as a town. Some of that would be picked up by the county.
correct. Let's see. There's probably a contribution to the towns, but I'm not sure about that. The county service is probably considered a state service, and it may all be state. I just don't recall the towns ever
But
saying
some
anything.
people can take advantage of those services even if they're in the town.
Correct.
Correct?
Being,
That's the difference.
yes, being an independent city, we have our own.
And we have to do everything.
So-
We don't have
yes.
a backup.
The-
I just want to point that out where we
Yeah.
can, because that adds additional cost to the city that's expended over a smaller group of people as opposed to a county that might have 100,000 people or 30 or 40,000 people right next door to us. So that's something we all have to keep in mind too, that we provide these services for our area, whereas our sister communities have additional resources in different ways. Not that, it is what it is, but it's something we need to keep in mind as we go through that.
Well, and I will also add that what we've been seeing lately is we may be in contract with an agency to provide a service for our students, and they're coming back early and they're renegotiating early, even in the middle of the contract, just because the cost for them to now treat has become so higher. It's just raised exponentially. And so we're sort of held hostage a little bit to that because we have very limited resources, and the resources we have are increasing their prices. And just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying about the numbers, we may have 18 kids, that we're overseeing in foster care, but then the next week you may have a family of 5 and a family of 3, then all of a sudden you've increased your number of services quite a bit, and we have no idea what that number will be from moment to moment. You just don't know. So it does feel, it is a tough one. It's a tough board to sit on because you do feel like so much of this is out of your control, but these are our kids and our families, and we have to support them. So.
And just one last thought on this. Some of these things actually help these families not have such issues, so we don't have as many people that end up having crisis, that have to go to jail and other things like that. But that's where we spend money to keep the jail costs lower, and that's why I brought that up before. You do these things because you should, but it has a cost, and then the jail still has to be funded. So that's the tricky part for all of that.
The largest rise is in the administration cost. Is that salary-based driven?
Yeah, the state did give some salary increases, but also they have to hire on additional people when they have a larger workload. A couple of grants, I'm trying to think, since y'all been on council, you've probably seen the foster care, Medicaid, trying to think what else, that you all have done special appropriations that have bumped these numbers up too, and most of the time those are associated with some state dollars that come in. Like I say, it's no rhyme or reason to it. I picked CSA just because that's one that can knock you off your feet pretty easily. Others are a little more predictable. That's at $883,000 and 31% in 5 years, and it's most likely not going to go down with the challenges that are out there these days.
A lot of this makes sense because a lot of crisis happened in conjunction with COVID.
Yep.
And those years after, and the disruption that took place.
And I'm not saying that that's unique to Radford. It's everywhere across the country. So every time you turn the TV on,
and it's hard to manage. That's a hard number to try to change.
And that's also, I know, you guys have heard me mention before that with some of the money that's returning to our community through some of the lawsuits with Major Pharma, and I think that we just even had some of the medicine providers, right, beyond that, like pharmacies. That's one of the things that I had said. Right now, we are with a conglomerate, but that was why I mentioned, does it make some sense to pull some of that back to help cover some of this? Unfortunately, that doesn't give us a great resolution moving forward. It's not really proactive. It's paying for what we have, but when we pulled the information from our students or the children that we were seeing and providing services for, the majority of those families had some level of addiction in their household. And so there's a direct correlation there. So that is why I brought that up, because we are now seeing some of the benefits of that lawsuit.
Okay, this is the school slide. This should help you. The other slide you saw was a total summary. So this breaks it down for the Radford City Schools. Our contribution to schools is $6 million, and then you had the 2 debt service pieces. You can see when that debt service came on board and when those numbers started jumping up for us as it relates to McCard. And then New York Community College is based on the formula. We have to give that amount. They use that amount to get a significant amount of state money, and then, of course, we've been supportive of the ACE program for many, many years.
So I got the number as I'm sitting here looking at it, close to the 7.885455 number that we're looking at on the previous slide. I still can't resolve the 12 millions. I get it that we had to spend the money those years and that's where money came in. I don't want to exacerbate it tonight. Is that something you can look at and then give us a clearer explanation?
Those are all right out of the audit, and I'm trying to think, let's can think of something quickly. Yeah, well, oh, yeah, maybe the issuance.
Well, I just want to make
Cost.
sure, because it doesn't make sense across the board. We just need to know the breakdown of those audited numbers to make sure of what we're talking about.
Yeah, this is your budgeted number,
The
so this will be.
7.8, I'm close to, as I add all of those together, 7,882,901 is the fiscal year 25 proposed. So we're very close to the 7,885,455 that's on the other page.
And I guess I should say, just note that depending on how tired I am, there could be a mistake.
I'm just trying
How
to
late
count
in the
every
evening
penny
it
where
is.
we can and looking for anything.
And also when it's done. So you all's budget book was printed yesterday?
5 o'clock yesterday.
5 o'clock yesterday, so that is 5 o'clock yesterday. So if I was working on this last
got
week,
you.
there may be some slight differences
That's
in the
fine.
number, because some of those numbers are constantly changing to the end of the year. Your estimate is the end of the year. When you look at that actual, it may be up or down depending on how things have gone.
Close is fine. The hard one I'm having a hard
Yeah, you
time
know
with are
those
the
audits,
212 millions, how that's broken out. I get it if it's the approximately 13 million we paid for the construction costs for the school, but then there's not the debt service in that same one. We just have to look at those numbers. I don't want to keep going on it, but if you can get us that so we can understand that one better.
Well, I'm not gonna harp on less than $2,000 either, but I just don't understand the concept of why the McCarg debt is gonna cost us more this year than last year. When you have debt and you make payments, the total debt goes down.
It's the way the VPSA, Virginia Public School Service Authority, does their grants, their loans. They start, the interest builds for a certain period of time. I think it goes up 5 years, Callista, correct me, and then it starts back the other way. So like now, we're finally to the point of 10 years that Bell Heath is got much more going towards the principal than it has the interest payment. So that's why on that early end, you see McCarg, if I'm hearing you right, it's just
No, I'm just wondering
inching
why
up just a little bit.
McCarg is costing us more.
Saying
Why
828,
is-
827, 827, but then
Yeah.
829 for this year.
Why is our debt more this year than it was last year if we've been making payments? Is that a fee where we missed a payment? Is that?
No, we haven't missed any payments. We pay
I
those
was
the
just
first of.
wondering, it doesn't make sense. Maybe
No, that's,
that was a
they,
fat finger.
yeah, they send the bill. Is it on there that way? Have you looked in check me to the budget? Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, they have a service fee also.
So their service may have gone up.
May- could've
Okay,
gone up. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
a very tiny number. I
thanks.
just wasn't.
It takes collective minds to think through. I knew I'd seen it, but I'm trying to think which thing it is. So, yeah. Yeah, so when you see that breakdown in your budget book, you'll see that debt issuance cost. Yeah. You'll be able to see that. Sorry about that. And then I just put, you all have a copy of the new school board budget that we just got. Their budget for the upcoming year is $46,803,799. I just added that in a note over the weekend. So let me try to explain from here on out. So the general fund is overall, all those rates and fees you saw at the beginning. The tax rate is the big thing that's about $7.5 to $8 million plus dollars that is generated based on the valuation of the taxes. The red boxes are both tax increases or changes in the tax rate with the reassessments that occurred back before this, the left, before 2016. 2020 was a reassessment year, so you had that drop down to bring in the same revenue, and then there was an increase up to get that 10 cents that the council was after at the time to make the debt service payment on McCarg. So we've been at 84 cents ever since. The 69 cents shown, and what this budget is built on, is that reassessment lowered tax rate. So the tax rate, let me see if I can explain this. All right, here we go. So the tax rate, the $1.2 billion, which is the increase over the 910 from the previous year. So the rate, the valuation increase, you have to start by state law. You've got to back your tax rate up first to the same amount of revenue neutral is what they call it, to bring in the same amount of money. So at 84 cents, we have to back our rate up, so the rate would be 64 cents to bring in within pennies, dollars, few dollars of the same amount of revenue as last year, current year. So from there is when you add on whatever you're going to do. We said 5 cents, so 5 cents is on that for 69. I don't know if I did, I can't remember if I'll look and see. I can't remember if I did a comparison to the other localities. I looked at it and wrote it down twice. I don't know if it made it to a slide or not. We're still less than the others around us, so we still got a good rate. And this rate is not y'all's school money, so it's actually going to support general fund. It's actually going to go support reserves. And that's the way it's advertised. So when you see, and there was an error in the advertisement Saturday, thank goodness we had enough time. It was just a percentage number that was wrong. So it went out, it goes out tomorrow, it's correct. And it's on our website, it's correct. And then the same thing with the budget advertisement, they are all correct. So, and what you all have got in front of you is correct.
And we'll get to this once you get to the total balanced budget, but I just wanted to mention at the 64 cents, you are balanced pending how much we're going to put into reserves, correct?
It was balanced on.
It's balanced on 69 because
But only
nothing's changed.
We're putting 800,000 toward reserves.
Yes, the only thing that changed from our meetings, we had 64, went to the 65. That went up, and it's over on, while it's showing in reserves, it's not necessarily there, but when you go to balance, that's what you're showing your balance being.
Right.
So
What I'm
reserves
saying-
is ultimately going to go up,
Right.
hopefully. Our end game is reserves go up. Okay. Did I explain that okay? I mean,
Well,
that's...
I think it's important to talk about this because.
This is the only time this happens in reassessment. Any other time, you're dealing with whatever the valuation is. The other thing that's included in your total revenue, this is just the balancing number to your 64 cents that equals your 84 cents with your increase. The other piece of this that's in addition, so when you're trying to calculate out, we've had 3 and 4% growth in real estate. So that does not, we can add to that the valuation of the new homes in Teton Crest, the new ones that are going to be coming in addition till they finish up out the patio homes on Rock Road. Anything new is included. So when you're looking, it's not just this number, it's also your growth. Just as clarification. But what you have to advertise, and it does, well, I'm just, all right, so here, I'm going to try this out too. These are all new. I'm trying new and different things. So to try to help compare, this is not a box that fits everything. So as best as we could do between the commissioner and us, and Callista and I trying to figure all this out, took houses, 2020 valuation, took 2 houses in West End, 3 houses in Central Radford, 3 houses in East End. We just focused on residential because that's the one you all usually most concerned because there's a lot of other. It's very, very, very difficult in any of these evaluations to get the numbers exactly right because I could be, at least we just don't use, we're just not there that much. So somebody that you got to kind of know how many people are in a household, the size of it and things like that. So the best we can do is try to get what we think these are our average houses as best we can do. At 78 cents, which was the tax rate in 2020, you see the numbers, and that's what people paid for each of those houses. For both June, that's the annual. So divide that in 2 to get your June and December payment. Okay, 2021 rate went to 84 cents. I thought you needed to see all of them, so I gave you the rate currently at 84 cents. With the 2024 valuation, you see how the prices go up. The 69-cent valuation and the variance on the right is the difference between last year and this year, not all the way back at the beginning. Let's see, the one that was 205, 4 down, when you look at that long range, that's where you start running. Somebody that has a house says, oh gosh, I'm paying more. Some will pay more, but some will pay less. I had only 2 of those in that grouping that it ended up being, the valuation didn't affect them that much. So
That's helpful. Yeah, that's good.
I mean, I was wondering how you were gonna put that into a graph. I think you did a good job. That was a difficult ask, for sure. So
That
I think
took,
you did a good
was
job.
that 2 days? I know, it's,
Yeah.
and I hope that there's lots of different variables, so all we could do is pick the best. Again, I think the big thing is noticing, I mean, look at our valuation. For somebody coming to our community, you're going to want to come to a community that you see a growing tax base, you see a growing revenue base, you see a growing property values, you see investment, private investment going on, you see all those things going on, and I think those are all positive signs. That's why I say when I'm looking at the budget, I'm not as, I hate all the stuff that would happen, and I worry about it every night and every day, but I think we've got such a good thread there because what we've seen, where we are and where we're going, we're going to get there. So these are positive signs of that. So, you know, obviously, on the bigger end of the scale, you're going to pay more. So, you know, $74 there. And the problem that we had is 2 houses side by side. We are not realtor cracker, cookie cutter, arrangement. Somebody that even lives in an area where there are similar houses, the house next door may have 1 extra bedroom in it, or maybe they've dug out their basement. They're not, you can't just say, well, in Plan A, $158,000. It just doesn't work that way. So we did the best we could in trying to get, so I hope that helps you all to look, and you've got that slide to be dwelling on, yes. If you think of something else, call me and we'll come up with something different.
I think the important thing is to help folks understand that this is not $1,000 a person. This is not averaging even $500 a person. On the high end, it might be a $500 increase. On the lower end, it could be less than $100. And again, your mileage is going to vary, obviously, but trying to figure that out to say, how do we do the things that we need to do and get the goals accomplished that we need to accomplish? How do you do that? Obviously, I think our preference had been to try to do it in smaller numbers over more years as we go. But, this is where we are today.
Most people I came in contact with were taking their valuation and dividing it by 100 and multiplying it by 89, right. And that's not what you do. You go back and you multiply it by the effective tax rate, which you all are going to have is 60, if you go forward, 69 cents. That is your rate you multiply once you divide by 100.
Keep this.
So anybody that has the tax ticket has gotten their valuation ticket. They can take that ticket that they got in January, February, whenever it was, divide it by 100, multiply it by 69, and they can know. Okay? Hopefully that explains it. Okay, so the highlights in the general fund after an hour. I wasn't sure how fast some of this would go. Some of it may go faster than others, but there's not a lot in there. As you all know, I've been cutting for a year, so we've taken out a number of things, but we've kept the things that are public safety driven, what the fire department needs, what the police department needs, IT, important items, making sure that, I know code enforcement's been a very positive thing. We've been able to get rid of a lot of blight. So, we've kept those kinds of programs, your investments in your schools. I know you're looking at more conversations. The school superintendent wants to do those with us, and that will occur over the next 6 months so that you'll know something different when you get into FY26. The special events or public grounds, no matter what, we're going to keep the community looking good. Looking at the 3 elections in the upcoming, and actually I think it's 4 elections. I think I missed one when I was counting. And then building maintenance. Your community's got to look good. So when you're cutting, you can't go in and, if you're planning on building paint is peeling, well, we need to go on and spend $4,000 or $5,000 and paint the building and make it look good. So that's generally what's in there. There's no big equipment. There's no cars. There's no vehicles. We were very fortunate during the pandemic to be able to acquire a number of police cars and ambulance, fire truck, things like that.
Can I pause for just a second on that and go back? So Chief, this is a question for you. With no new vehicles, one of the concerns that have been brought forward was some of our current police cruisers were challenged. Are we going to be okay on our rolling stock for police cruisers with this budget in mind? Okay.
Yeah, we had a big roll. How many vehicles was it total? Can you remember was it
Outfitted, yeah.
And I think we're officially back, ready to be from the actual outfit.
And just to clarify, if no one can hear what the chief was saying, when I asked the question, he said absolutely he thought we were gonna be okay with the cars. We got a number of the cars this last year with the ARPA money that helped us do that. The big issue has been outfitting them, but we're getting close to getting that taken care of.
And at this point, other than being like a really backup vehicle, all the Crown Vics are off the fleet, correct? So we've got a few, the Chargers are still there. We're still having some motor issues, a recent motor issue. So we're still having some issues with the Chargers, but we've been moving folks over to the new vehicles. So you should be seeing mostly the Ford Explorers, which is the vehicle of choice out there on the road. So that is the case. It has been an hour and a half. Why don't we take a 5-minute break because we're going to get in enterprise funds. I will try to move faster. I want to make sure if y'all got any general fund stuff, questions at this point. And we can come back around. I think I got a pretty decent summary at the end.
Let's
Although
leave
I
the
don't know
stream
after all this, I'm
going.
not sure.
We'll just mute all the microphones, leave the stream going. I don't want to mess it up and have people confused. Thank you.
Yeah,
We'll take a 5-minute break.
yeah, let's reconvene at 7:30. Okay?
It's set to the PowerPoint, so now people.
No, we're good. I mean, I just didn't want to pause it.
So can I talk with that? Are we live or?
I didn't use it, but I just don't want to have it. I know, I remember,
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
you stuck that with his mic on. Yeah. I think me and Jenny panicked to turn his mic off. Yeah, so. Yeah, that's fine. Yep. And then when we come back in 5 minutes, you could just clip back up and turn it back on, and we'll be good.
Remind me to turn on.
Okay.
Are we getting comments? Can you hear us?
No, I've been texting Jenny.
How many are watching?
11.
That's about probably the same 11.
Yep. So I've been texting Jenny. She said it's clear. With the new interface, you could technically use the wireless mics for one person. I wouldn't use them for multiple people because now with the simple controls, it mutes all mics, all wireless mics when you hit mute. You can't just mute one or two. So, but as long as it's just David presenting, we'll be fine.
We will go on and get started again. We've got a long evening still to go. So David, are you ready to rock and roll and talk about enterprise funds?
Hold on, let me get mic'd up here. Okay, so we just spent a good bit of time on the general fund and all the things that are involved in the general fund. That is the area that most people in the public come in contact with other than utility provision. So if they need a service of some kind, public safety, fire, rescue, things like that are in that area, or they come in contact with the library or the rec department, those are the areas, and schools are the areas that you see in the general fund. So getting into the enterprise funds, these are the self-supporting. There are three enterprise fund categories: water, wastewater, electric fund, and sanitation. And we'll try to go a little faster. This is the breakdown. Biggest part of it is the electric fund, followed by water, wastewater, and then sanitation. So we'll start with the water, wastewater fund first. Total budget is $6.3 million. The components that are in the water, wastewater fund include water treatment plant, water pumps and tanks, water distribution system, the sanitation sewer pumps, the regional sanitary sewer treatment facility, which is Pepper's Ferry, and then the sanitation sewer distribution system itself. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on numbers, mostly go to the bottom. I've tried to sum where I could as best I can. If you get a number that doesn't work, it's probably a chance I could have missed something. I tried to check them twice, but like I say, over a period of time and long nights and evenings trying to get the numbers together. Sometimes I'll miss one, or my folks will make an 8 out of a 0. So y'all did a good job of reading my scribble. So water sales, when you look at all of these, 5-year growth in water revenue has been good. 8.9% and 13.6% when you look at, what I did is broke that down. The number's not there, but the 5-year growth is looking at that 8.9, which is the years up to when we had rate changes. Then after that, that 13.6, you had the growth in the wastewater sales. It also had the rate increases as well. Under that, the next star, and the stars are up there for the different pieces. The 2024 water rate that increased $4 for 4,000 gallons and $2 for 2,000 gallons for wastewater were reflected in just the two increases that we had. And then in 25, the rate increase that I'd been talking about, and that's because of the cost of regional treatment and then the investments in the water, wastewater treatment pumps and things. We're looking at a small $2 increase, and I will analyze that one as well shortly. So,
well, I wanted to talk about this a little bit. So with our water sales, even with Montgomery County coming off of the water the rest of the way, this is the projection that it's not a plummet in our water sales.
We dropped it about $50,000 or $60,000,
Right,
I
from
think.
what we had originally planned, but it is not the end of the world where that's coming off. I just wanted to point that out. Second thing, David and I serve on the regional, Pepper's Ferry Regional Wastewater Treatment. Both years that we've had an increase, there were increased costs at the facility, chemicals, personnel, and projects that had to happen, that pushing them further down the road would have resulted in bigger problems, more issues. We push back on both of those increases as board members, but we have to keep that board solvent as well, that organization solvent, and so that's where those costs are coming through. Is that a pretty good representation?
Yeah, and I've got a little slide. The percentage was 2.4 or something like that, I think it was, but it's a large number, so you can see, when we get into the expense side. But the water sales and the wastewater sales, while we did have those two small increases, have mostly been driven on the growth of the community, more customers coming online and things like that. And despite the expenses, we had a lot of expenses on the water side because we really needed to do a lot to bring the plant up to date and do the technology improvements and things like that all occurred, which we're stabilized in that. We've got good facilities to last us for a very long time. We're switching over to sewer. Most of that is going to be pump station improvements. We're looking at sewer lines, a lot of those kind of things. If it's not too deep, they're jobs that our public works, water, wastewater folks can do. So we try to do as many things in-house as possible. Those availability fees, we haven't talked about those, but our availability fees have not changed in a decade. So We are bumping those up a little bit. They don't affect our customers here in town. It's only new stuff, and we will grandfather projects that are coming in, like Teton Crest and some others that you all have seen in the works. They'll be in under the new rate if we can get a building permit from them before the rate changes. We'll honor the old rate for them, so that way they're not surprised, and we're still going to be lower than everybody else. But we'll get to that in just a few minutes.
Well, what if they don't?
On what the availability fee is?
What if they don't make their stuff in by the time it rates?
Then it will go.
to the new
It'll
rate?
go to the new rate. Yes. Yeah. And usually we're pretty good with that. In fact, I talked to them Friday of last week when we were getting the numbers together to be sure. We think we've got a pretty good handle between what goes in through Melissa as site plans. So if they have a site plan, even if it's preliminary into us, we usually count that if they can get their construction going within 6 months.
Is that typically where you just run power to a construction site or something like that? Is that with the availability fees? What all does that?
Yeah, two things. I'm gonna get to availability slide, but to help you now to think about it. So there are two things involved. Availability fee is the increased demand on your water system, the increased demand on your sanitary sewer system. It goes to support, generally goes to reserves to support anything you do in your facilities, capital facilities. It's what it takes on the outskirts of that project. The immediate project is right there where the construction is, but this is the whole system. That project is costing more to treat the whole system, to keep the whole system maintained. So those availability fees are the things that the developers don't see, and everybody charges for them for that because it helps your overall. The connection fees, in this case, are the cost, and what was happening is we were looking and seeing that the cost of labor, the cost of materials and all was more than we were getting, and the other rate folks should not have to be subsidizing development. It needs to be out of that, and that then is either reflected in the building price sale, contracts, whatever it is that may be associated with it down the road. And again, not significantly large increases. And I've got a slide on that in just a minute.
We're still very reasonable compared to everybody else.
Yep. Actually, we're still going to be about the lowest around. You can see here, biggest part is wastewater treatment in the red, and then the pumps and all are in the blue, as this is how the department's made up. And then you can see the concern that we've had through COVID is our expenses, because we needed to do so many things to keep treatment. There were more people at home, our flows were higher, a number of things that were different, and we've had to do repairs on lines and those kind of things. The expenses were jumping up above revenues. The proposal gets us back in line, and we're going to be back in line. That's a 23 number. 24, the numbers are on top of each other. So we're back to where we need to be on water and sewer. Expenses, I'll just let you look down through here. You've got, and please, when you get home and you look at the budget books and you got any questions, send me a note, because I'm covering a lot of stuff. It's hard to absorb in 2.5, 3 hours, everything that's in here, and there's a lot of numbers, and some things I may be forgetting and need to come back around. Water treatment is the biggest expense. That's our plant operations at $1.4 million. You can kind of go down through there and look at the bigger things. The distribution system, that's Don's crew and everything he does, put water and sewer lines in, make the repairs, things like that, 1.4. We run a very efficient water and sewer operation considering how big we are, and the fact that we still have our own plant and we're still independent as opposed to some more regional systems. We do sell a portion of water to Pulaski County still, so we mentioned that earlier, and that's a good thing. Sometimes they take more, sometimes they take less, depends on their demand and what's going on at their water treatment plant as well. And then Pepper's Ferry that mentioned at the bottom, I think that increase, it's not on this, I guess it was in one of the other presentations from before, was around 2.4, 2.5% increase. And then payment in lieu is that expense that goes back from this fund that transfers back to the general fund that I mentioned earlier.
Just to point this out, again, with other localities having their own water systems and agreements that have been put in place for many decades, we can't just say, no, you still got to buy water from us, you still got to do this. This is all within basically our 10 square miles that we have to expand. So again, new housing, new businesses, something at West Radford Commerce Park potentially, things like that can help us get there, but it's not like we can go sell water to somebody way far away.
Oh, and I forgot when we took the break, back in general fund, that personnel count, you'll notice, had a big drop in it. forgot to mention it, most of the ones in the enterprise fund, it takes the people that I've got to do the things that we do. So there's not a whole lot. Just know at any given point in time, if there's transition where we have savings where maybe 4 months while we're trying to hire somebody to replace somebody. So anytime you've got that savings, it's not all in the budget, but it comes out at the end once you get to the end of the fiscal year. So I forgot to mention that on the general fund. Okay, so here we go again, another comparison. So in looking at, of course, water's not changing. You can see we got the lowest water rate around at $20.32, and that's for that 4,000 gallons. Wastewater, we're talking about that $2 increase to help us with the improvements that we want to make in the system and the cost of Pepper's Ferry. You'll notice the increase is about somewhere, it goes from $14 to $16, and I think overall it's like 18% or something like that. And that just kind of gives you an idea to look at some of the other areas around us to see where we are. Eventually, we're going to need to bump that rate up a little bit more. Now is not the time to do that, but we've got the ability to do it. They can put a lot more back in your reserves, and it can do a lot more improvements as we go along. Our plant is so good, and our system is so good, we don't need to look at regionalization at this point, but we still, just to remember, we're an 8 million gallon plant that's producing 2 million gallons, so we've got that capacity there. So for our new West Radford Commerce Park, we want a water or electric user if at all possible, because those are the things. We built the 8 million gallon plant and the expansion there and built the system that we have for electric was to accommodate the foundry when it was here in 2013 and earlier. So they were using a lot of water at the time. They did get into some recycling, but still those were big numbers for us.
And the
I'm
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you have not had a chance to go and take a tour, you will be amazed at what all they accomplished. It is a little rough on the eyes, I've got to be honest. It's a little rough on the eyes, but it is amazingly effective and efficient. And I would highly recommend you go and get a tour. They love it when you show up, and they'll tell you all about it. In fact, I promised them I'd go and watch when they clean the tanks, the holding tanks.
That's interesting to see,
So
yeah. It's got a new roof
that's
on
my
it.
thing.
The gate that I was telling you all about that's been stuck, that's going to be fixed next week. I think they contacted and said the gate is finally in to be able to, the hoist to take care of that. And then we've done the telemetry modifications inside, and then done the telemetry modifications for the 8 tanks so far. So a lot of good things going on at the plant. So it is a modern plant. This is a pretty simple slide, mostly shows you everything in red is the increases. You can see the water increase last year, not doing anything with that this year. We bumped up in sewer. The previous year was 2018. And then wastewater is going from went from 1224 to 1424 to now 1624.
All
right, so
quickly,
here-
we have the infrastructure for $8 million, 8 million gallons, correct? Yeah, so I
Yep.
mean, already to the West Radford Commerce Park.
Yeah, if we
and
had
so that infrastructure's already there. too.
Coca-Cola or Pepsi or somebody come to our new site that we could produce anything they want. Pepsi, yep, there you go.
All the way.
Yep, any of those, Gatorades, any of those kinds of things that may be looking, any kind of specialty water, we got it. We can supply about anything. So we filled that out in all of those forms to the state. We let them know we had everything, and there's also a significant Atmos gas line through there as well. So pretty much any kind of utility anybody needs is there. They can even get water off the river if they need to for something else. Just to look at the rate analysis, looking at the current and proposed and the increase, so to give you an idea of what the customer base is, again, trying to get as close as possible. We took a 2,000 gallon customer, a 4,000 gallon customer, a 6,000 gallon, a 10,000 gallon, and tried to put the increase to those, because this is just your wastewater rate. Water doesn't change. So if you're 2,000 gallons, your rate will increase $2, and that's 1,764 customers fall in that category. We had a little more trouble getting the categories narrowed down, but 3,600 customers fall in the 4 to 10,000 gallons, and you can see there's only a few in that 10,000 gallon category, but you can see 4, 6, and 8 are your increases a month. So not significant numbers, but did want to give you an idea of the breakdown. So tried to look at things a little differently as we've done these analysis.
What's a good example of a 6,000 to 10,000 gallon consumer? That's a business, right?
Most of the ones on the far right are going to, well, no, these are all, we stuck with residential. So
Okay.
but there's some houses that use 10,000 gallons, I guess if you
I guess you're
A lot of
filling
showers
4
and a lot of-
swimming pools or something.
Teenage showers.
Swimming pools, all those kind of things can fall into that. I know there's not a lot on that upper end, but we couldn't identify them readily without us going through
Okay.
all 5,000
I was gonna say,
accounts.
That seemed like a lot of water.
Yeah, so like I said, it's not many in that. Most everybody's going to fall in that 2,000 to probably a little less than the 6,000 gallons. Okay, then this is what I mentioned earlier. Current, you can see our water availability fee, sewer availability, connections, where we are now, 5,300. We're only going to go to 6,000, so it's not a huge jump, but it will help us in recouping the cost of materials for those connections. You all heard me talk at one of the meetings about prices of meter connections and the meters and just all the brass and stuff that goes into those, plus the cost of our labor putting them in. So just a small increase won't affect our customers. This will just be development driven.
So if we're having 100 houses built, it's about $700 different.
Yeah. And if you want to figure out both, if you add both those together and multiply it by your 700 houses, and there you go. That'd be nice.
Does this tie into an incentive where we would cover that cost? I know we've done that. Is that more for business related, for connection fees?
But we've run some through the EDA, have paid some costs on those. Most of the time, unless there can be some discounts if like a developer puts in their own. Sometimes we don't have enough people, and if they've got the big equipment there and they can put it in and we can watch it being put in, right? We obviously won't charge them our rates if we're watching them do it. It may be much smaller than that. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, well, yeah. I was just wondering if you offered that on that was more of a big bend. I don't know.
The times that some of these get cut back will be like if the developer's building the utility lines in the development for us, and we don't have to go into it. So anytime the developer is involved heavily, it's a win for them to do it. It's a win for us because then we don't have to figure out the scheduling and try to do it with 8-member crew,
Right.
and they've got a ton of folks there doing it. If that's kind of covering your question.
Thank you.
And that's maybe why people want to come and build in Radford and like.
Reasonable price, and we try to work with them. Yep, very much so. I think that's the case. And you've heard some testimonies from some folks on that. So hopefully that's a positive thing that we've been able to push out from administration to everybody. So we'll look at the highlights. About 1,000 feet of linear service lines. Most of that 1,000 feet is kind of coming under Melissa's community block grant program. We've got some new lines that are going to go in out on 17th Street to support some new housing development there. Those coastal water meters I mentioned earlier, those tank improvements. Pepper's Ferry was 9.8%. I'm sorry, the 2.1 is in another place in sanitation. So 9.8% increase in Pepper's Ferry. I thought that number wasn't setting with me right. And then those wastewater pump improvements. And then this pipe freezing machine has probably been the most entertaining thing that everybody has enjoyed with me because I cannot wait to see this thing happen. It basically is a $4,500 machine that when we're trying to make a connection and you can't find the valve anywhere, you can put that thing on it and it freezes the water in place and they're able to make a repair. So that will speed up. It's wild. I've never heard of one, and I've seen it work. Yeah, I wanted to use for a lot of stuff I could think
I
of.
was going to
So.
say, what's the maximum temperature that's effective in?
I don't know, but I think they said that you can isolate it pretty good. I think they're thinking that for our weather, it can be used for most. I mean, if it's obviously 100 degrees, it may not work, or you may be limited in how long you can do it because you can only put so much on it before the pipe will crack and have other issues. But Don Green's excited about it. He's excited because I'm excited. I think they're more excited over here because I just keep talking
Well,
about it.
you
'Cause
know,
it's
again,
something different and for cheap.
The last few years, we've spent a lot of times putting in valves and doing things like this so that we improve our service time and that we don't have as much downtime if we have a break or anything like that. And it's made a huge difference. Rather than half the city be out, it might be a neighborhood for a half a day. you know.
So that would probably be a field trip for us. It'd be
That
something
sounds
new and
good.
different. Okay, any questions about water, wastewater? Pretty simple. Trying to hold the line on things. Got some new development types of stuff coming along. Minimum sewer rate increase, but otherwise pretty status quo. Solid waste fund, I'm going to speed through this really quick. This is very status quo, 1.6, almost 1.7 million. And the thing that's important as in all of these things that I think is unique, mentioned at the beginning, unique to Radford, is that we are going to keep all the services that we can flowing, unless we run into some other kind of problem down the road or more expensive, we got to cut something back. So we're going to keep curbside trash collection, Christmas tree service, the dumpster service, the drop center operations, the spring special collections, and then, of course, working with our Regional Solid Waste Disposal Authority, New River Resource Authority. Great investment in both the regional treatment for both wastewater as well as sanitation. Sanitation charges, that's pretty much what runs the entire department. The growth there, you can see the 5-year growth is 3.8%. We had those few rate improvements, but we still have enough. When you're looking at your budget and you see the ups and downs, when the expense goes up, Radford's always been known for trying to pay cash for anything we can buy. We rarely ever, that's why you see so few things. We had a sanitation truck we financed at the beginning of COVID just because we knew things were going to be tight. This last one we paid cash for. You'll see where that big bump is. Probably in retrospect, we probably should have just financed it. But, you know, if you can do it and make it work, and we still had reserves, we made it go. Biggest part is obviously disposal, all in red, and then collection, all in blue. You can kind of look quickly down. The cost of collection in Radford's $1 million. We do a lot for $1 million. That's curbside all over. Regional landfill does a great job at disposal, $175,000. That Cloyd's Mountain is the closeout of the old landfill. It's going to be there forever. It's all of the environmental stuff. It's not environmental issues, but it's all the stuff that it takes forever with Pulaski County. Radford and Pulaski were in together originally. Radford had issues with our old landfill. We joined with Pulaski, went to Cloyd's Mountain. We're up there, then that landfill reached capacity, and they moved to Radford, which is the one out on the backside of Ingalls Mountain, worked there until the new modern landfill that has all the other regional players in it that's out on, almost across from this one on Cloyd's Mountain, actually. Recycling, as we mentioned at one of the meetings, it's a $108,000 investment you do in the environment. You don't save money. It probably helps us a little bit on disposal, but you know, you're doing it for the environment. You're recycling cardboard. We recycle everything, so we're doing it all. No debt service in the department. That small amount was just a little bit that was left over, and you can see where we had those others were payments on the trucks up to then. Where's my jump up? Is it the collection? You can see where the jump up occurred. That was where we paid off the truck.
Back on the recycling, where the number's going down, we're still recycling the same or more, we're just getting more efficiencies?
Yeah, we're 24 to 31% most of the time, which meets the state standard, and depending on, we do get some stuff that's once it's commingled, or it gets a bunch of wires in it, we try to put as many signs up, remind folks don't put wire hangers in there. If they do, they clog up the machine. That whole load has to go to the landfill. Doesn't happen that often, but things like that. Like old dry cleaning wire hangers, you know, that are wire. You know, so many have got the plastic ones now. It'll take that, but any kind of wires, it gets hung up in the cogs and messes up the machine. So if
That many people that put wires in there that,
they can. That's why we've got the note there now to keep that from occurring. So just compare again, just trying to keep up with my theme, even though no changes. You know, still very reasonable. And this is what I could find. It does not include everybody's increased rate. So just know that when you're looking at this, it's what I could find at the time. A lot of communities are in budget right now, so they may, double and maybe
It's at least
going up.
Yeah.
So, and then you see level fees, no changes. Drop center, keeping the hours and all that we had. Looked at Sundays, but right now we'll hold that for now and not add that expense. The problem we have with Sundays and late Saturday is if the drop center fills up, we have to close it because we don't. And if we plan to open on Sunday and we fill it up on Saturday, we can't open on Sunday because we don't have a place to dispose. So just know that we're keeping that in mind. The special collection, we keep going, and then cost of the Resource Authority.
no.
Do you have a rough?
Go ahead.
Do you have a rough figure of the cost per additional day to be open or cut? I mean, I know just a ballpark. So if someone were to say, well, we need to be open on a Sunday, or if we cut a day, what would it save us? Just
Let me see. I can probably take, well, it's okay, when you go to your budget line item, you'll see the recycling and then the personnel there. Add those two together and divide it by, we're closed Sunday and Wednesday. So we're open 8-hour days the rest of the time. So, yeah, 5 days times 8, divide that into it, and that'll give you a rough idea. I'll double check the number for you, but if you wanted to know quickly, normally I can figure it up in my head fast enough, but I'm a little foggy, so.
I would just say that from somebody that has to take their trash there every single day, I know that my husband and probably a lot of other husbands would be happy to know that it's good, like, that he would rather it be closed on Sundays and know that the hours are gonna be true versus having to close it early and him planning on taking the trash at 4 and not being able to. So I like the fact of it being open the times that we think are gonna work and giving away, you know, a Sunday. We had to choose. Oh, he gets so mad.
Yeah.
So mad,
And,
yeah.
and be somebody from another locality and show up and see how mad they get at our guys, because that you have to be from Radford. It is for that purpose. And kudos to Danny and all those guys up there, because they are really making sure that they help folks out. They're mashing the materials in, trying to get as much efficiency out of those loads as we possibly can. The only things that sometimes fill up, we try to watch them, and generally got a cycle, but this time of year as folks are emptying out apartments and moving back home and things like that, as the university closes the recycling facility at the rec hall, can sometimes you go up there one day and it's empty, and then the next day it just happens to be brimming over. So you do have that as an option for recycling if the center is closed.
Yeah,
That
David.
was, oh, I'd say that's one of the areas that, you know, I do get feedback where they do wish it was open on Saturday and Sunday, because that's when people are home doing the work. And I know that we've talked about this, we've had trouble staffing it, has been a really big issue, and those were the inconsistent hours, and so that's when we'd pull back on that Sunday. But it would really be a goal to have it open on Saturday and Sunday. I was there on Saturday, and we were in a line. I mean, it was very busy. It's a very, very, very high traffic there on a Saturday.
Get there really early,
And
and
I want to point out that, you know, typically a community like Radford that offers curbside, and I know it doesn't hit every single family, but doesn't have drop centers like you have in the county. This is an extra service that we were dedicated to making sure we could continue to provide, and that has been a hard thing to get done over the last few years. So I'm glad it works as well as it does. I don't disagree. I think being open on Sunday makes sense, but it is a cost, and we just have to figure it out.
We may want to consider some new signage down there too. There's a lot of handwritten signs down there.
yeah.
About U-Hauls and.
Yeah, and then it's funny the way that happens, because sometimes it's on the fly that something shows up and you say, now how in the world? So they're making a sign like 10 minutes
Yeah.
after the U-Haul leaves.
I realize what they're doing, but it's.
Yeah, they do have some new signs coming, so good. Thank you for
okay.
pointing that out. That reminds me to follow back around on that.
Okay.
Yeah, we do try to make sure that there's not any dump trucks or garbage trucks or U-Hauls or anything like that where people can be bringing in. We generally try not to have that all of a sudden because somebody could just fill the place up, you know, all of a sudden. Okay, the electric fund.
And just because I had somebody ask, RU handles their own trash on their own campus?
Correct.
They do not bring it to our facilities?
Correct, and they haul their own recycling up to
Yes.
the recycling facilities, and they run their own sanitation up there because.
We are not paying for RU trash.
Correct, and we have looked at partners, you know, in pools and things like that, because they've got one of those flatbed trucks that can pull the garbage, and it worked out well that Pulaski got one, and we've just been partnering with them, and they've given us a good rate. So they pull for us, and that promotes that relationship there. Okay, electric fund. This is going to be your big one. This is the one we've most talked about. I hope that I've spent more detail. I'm going to try to do this as best I can. $28.8 million, that is the biggest electric fund we've had, and it is primarily because of that huge purchase power piece that's in there that continues to go up. Components, we do electric administration and service, electric production, wholesale power purchases. We do distribute our own power. We have our own public lighting system. So great electric department, facilities and issues are tended to. We talked about SCADA earlier, and those kinds of things and those investments cause us to be able to get to the site quickly, make the repair quickly, and keep services up. And I would say that on both the water and sewer side are just fantastic. Electric sales, take a look. 19 million, 28 million, 29 million. The summaries are there below. 24 reflects the APCO and the wholesale power cost adjustment pass-through in the amount. And then also the 25, we've had three increases in, you know, a year and a half. So those are big increases, and we've got to go up on the base this time because of what's going on with APCO. To foreshadow a little bit, we are staying less than APCO. You may have seen APCO has now asked for another residential increase before the end of the year that will bump them up even more. I did not see the amount. I know I've gotten the notice on the application. That is retail customers, not their wholesale customers. So the wholesale customer, we hope, is going to stay pretty stable over the next little bit. So you see here, this is one of our concerns. While revenues are still above expenses, you can see back when the foundry was around, we had those profits. We were able to put into reserves the things, the money, the backup that we needed, and then system costs and customer issues, and then stagnation, of our rates and all for a while, and then COVID, caused those numbers to come closer together. So that's what's made everything tighter than it has been in the past, and we haven't had that big flexibility, because when you look at just a couple simple line items, you can go from $500,000 to $1.5 million in profit quickly. I mean, just a few additional development pieces, a new industry, a small rate increase, things like that can change your numbers. These areas where the big numbers are where your biggest changes are. The other things that you change a little bit, because really when you look at property taxes, you're not moving the needle a whole lot. I mean, look at how much it takes to get $119,000 for us, coming into the community versus, the big corridor in the Christiansburg area or something in Roanoke or Salem. So, when you're looking at what you've got, you're looking at the base that you've got.
Now, with the proposed increase, and when you spread that out, what are you projecting it to look like in 2025? I mean, are we going to be able to create some separation?
Yep, they're going the other way. So 2024, we're hopefully going to start with that little bit of increase we had this last year, and you will see that increase as we go along.
But I do want to point out, that increase that you're talking about this last year is the wholesale power pass-through that we do.
Base rate
And that's
didn't
just
change.
where that power is eating us up and killing our margin to be able to have the transfers and everything else that we do. It's not a base rate increase.
Correct.
That's what we're going to be talking about for 25.
Yeah, and as you look, when you're looking at that transfer, going back to conversations we have all the time, is that because everybody pays an electric bill, that transfer from the electric over to the general fund, then everybody pays, and that helps defray that 45% non-taxable piece. If not, you could fix the health of the electric department for a long time by removing the transfer, and all of a sudden go up, $3 million in profit. But you would have to divide that out by the 119. That would be your tax rate in the general fund to get rid of that transfer. Ultimately, down the road, if this continues, this trend continues, we're going to have to go that way. I mean, it's not going to be in a few years, but sometime somebody's going to be looking at it down the road, because it's only going to make sense. You want to have those revenues.
Can you go back one slide? So where that, you look at the difference between the $15, $16 million up to the $20 million of cost, essentially, that ate up that margin and that profit. And that ate up a lot very, very, very quickly. When you start looking at where did $4 and $5 million a year go, well, you can see it right there. As your operating expenses grow so significantly, we had not raised rates, base rate, since 2018. So you could see the little tiny dip for 2020 when COVID was going on and most students weren't here, and then we're fairly level over those years. That's what's so hard with that. Now, one of the challenges, and again, we based a lot on this real estate this electric rate instead of real estate for a long time. You don't normally have a cost margin difference with your real estate like you would with your power. And so that's just one of the natures of our system, the way we have it set up, that's how that can come on so quickly, whereas another community might not suddenly have an extra $3, $4, $5 million in expenses that hit them without revenue going up.
I will say one thing to be cautiously optimistic about is while I wouldn't bank on us being able to have those transfers in the future, you see the difference that a foundry type situation works. So if we were able to land something significant there, I mean, there is opportunity. So that's something to keep in mind too.
Data centers,
you don't want to count your chickens
data
before they
centers
hatch,
use a
but-
lot of electricity. these companies we've been talking about that could be water users and electric users.
Well,
So
that's
it
one of
doesn't
the
take much. You got to
reasons.
be thinking about, you don't want to just jump at the first thing that comes our way. We got to make sure it's going to be best for our community long-term in utility usage and generate the jobs long-term.
And one of the reasons we spent $250,000
Hopefully
on that
longer.
property and pursued it for so many years was for that very reason. So we would have that possibility and we would have that opportunity. It just simply wasn't there when it was in private hands, even though we tried pretty hard.
Red is power purchase. Our operations is, so it's important to not forget that not only are we buying power, but then we also have to be able to wield it through the system with our capital improvements and then also our manpower to make sure that lines are up and repairs are made and things like that. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here. It's getting late, and I know everybody's getting tired. But general operation 2.8 is all the things it takes inside our department to keep things going. This just shows you a few of the capital related things, keeping our lines current, distribution system current, substation improvements, all the things it takes to buy transformers and things like that. The licensing and fees associated with power production, the debt service is on the hydro facility, and then that transfer to the general fund is, as I said, that big item. So just keep those general things in mind.
Back one, on your personnel, is that enough people to run our system the way we're accustomed to running it?
We're down a few people, but one of the challenges that we're having in that department is getting experts. We've been working with Phil and New River to hopefully bring folks, because as you know, we've got a number of people that could be retiring in the next few years. So we got to make sure that we've got another level of folks moving in to get those training pieces. So that is a concern of ours, to make sure that we've got the folks and that we're moving forward. It is okay right now. It gives us a couple. We can divide into three, but gives us enough. But as we pull away from the tightness of our cash flow and monetary, we do need to. This is an area that we'll need to improve. Okay, so expenses, wholesale power purchase. Again, the big one. This is all the breakdowns. I'm not going to go over those. The things that are affecting this wholesale power purchase is as we've mentioned, and as y'all also saw in some of our meetings when we've been talking about the power contract. The rising fuel costs, PJM, which is the transmission to get power from wherever it's being bought to us, the APCO energy demand, and then contracting increases, and then inflation. We do have Blue Ridge Power, which is made up of the 11 members of the throughout the state, and they are a great resource to work together and to lobby together and that kind of thing to keep rates down, and then also go after some of these things like this big power increase cost is being transferred to us that we talked about from West Virginia, trying to fight that together, and that could bear some fruit where we couldn't do it on our own. This does not include all of the new increases around us, but with our increase, we're still less than APCO and less than some of our neighbors. Two others have probably gone up, but I couldn't verify those before this slide was made over the weekend. All right, so I'm going to try to explain some of this. So you will see 22, 23, 24, 25. So I tried to give as much comparison as we could. We've gone to 1,000 kilowatt hours in our comparison because that's what others are doing rather than that 900. So our customer minimum, that means if you're gone and you just have power on, you're getting charged $7.02. Energy base, if you use a less than 1,000 kilowatts, you can see the costs across there. We're talking about that is that base increase to $90.86 from $89.20. Doesn't look like not a lot, but it does move the mark for us some. Over 1,000 kilowatt hours is about $10. It moves from $8.43 to $10. And then fuel is going to stay the same from what we can see now. And then that wholesale power rate adjustment, those are the calculating factors. Everything in red is the changes, and you can see the amount change, and then what that looks like across the board for in comparison to budget to budget to budget. This is not customer comparison. I'm getting ready to do that one for you too. And if this doesn't blow your mind, then the others. Okay, so tried to figure out customer charges. And again, this was quite the challenge. So you see the current 1,000 kilowatt hours on the left, the proposed increase, and then you can see current at 2,000, proposed increase 2,000, current 5,000 proposed. So that just takes 3 different customer types, residential, and tries to compare them so you could get an idea about what the impact is. At the very bottom is the number of customers. So we have the most customers at 3,800 in that 1,000 kilowatt hours. So when you look down through there and you see the new proposed, the increase goes $29.23 from $138.21 now to $167.44. And just know that doesn't work for everybody, but that is what we can best tell an average customer. Somebody may have an extra family member or 2 with them. It could be different, but this is trying to take 3 customers and figuring out how to best customer groups. It's not 3 customers, but it's in those customer groups. So we picked and choose as many to get averages on in that 3,800. That next customer base is that 2,000 kilowatt hours. You can see the proposed column, 327, and you're basically getting a $72 increase in your rate. And then that last one, it's only 8 customers, a lot of electricity used in those homes. It's nearly $200.
And this is a monthly, and when will this?
This would kick in July. You would pay in August for the July bill. So it'd be for the July usage.
Your
Correct.
charge increase potentially could start happening.
Yes, we probably should have increased the wholesale power rate adjustment this spring, but it was in budget, and it just, with everything else, it was just adding too much complication to people already having questions. So
And
we tried to.
base rate is really what we make our money on that allows us to have the big transfer. We hadn't changed the base rate in 6 years.
Yeah.
So that's the
2018.
big difference. The wholesale
Is-
power cost adjustment is just where we're being slammed with that additional power purchase. But the base rate is where we're able to make a little bit of, like you were saying, getting some air between those 2 lines. We hadn't done it for 6 years. And part of that was intentional with the COVID situation to try to help people recover. But that's millions of dollars.
And in our discussion, everybody around us is APCO. Our bills are should be less than the APCO
The
bill
only
of a
one
typical
is
customer.
Blacksburg and Virginia Tech has a little bit, but most of Blacksburg, I think, is APCO.
Yeah, it's only,
So it's just
Virginia
a
Tech
small
is just a small
percentage, so
part.
that's the only one that's a little bit different.
So I hope these detailed slides have been helpful. We tried to do as much as we could to try to bring it down to kind of that level that you're looking at. So what's going to be in the electric department? Substation line improvement. Much needed a truck and trailer. This is our only pieces of equipment, but I'm telling you, the truck that they have is one that I need in another area, so we're going to move it. And as I mentioned a while back, it'll move a couple of times before it gets to the rec department, which will be its last stop. The wholesale power cost, and then of course our professional services, which is Blue Ridge Power, and the legal that goes along with all the licensing that we have to do. And that's a piece that Tim talked about, but we haven't gotten into a lot of detail. The detail of keeping our licenses with the hydro, to keep our licenses for the city, all the things that we do in the FERC filings, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, are just big. So we have to make sure that we're doing all that stuff. Okay, any questions about the enterprise funds? I am going to fly through special funds. One thing, I'm getting sore and tired. Believe it or not, I don't know how I've gotten this together, being injured for 7 weeks, and my staff just probably wishes I had stayed away because they've been trying to figure out all of my scribble and stuff as we've gone along. So we've gotten a lot of stuff accomplished in a little bit of time. I think this is probably one of the best presentations. I hopefully clarify the things you hear, the things I hear, hopefully to get it to the point that we're understandable. We don't try to cause these things to happen. We don't try to prevent fixing them sometimes, and that's one of the things that's been the challenge. While I've said this budget has not been surprising, I think that's been one of the challenging things, is I've never seen so many things collide at one time in 2 years and make this big an impact. We're small and we know anything can affect us, but it does not take long to go through a few $1 million. It just doesn't. I mean, these rate increases, the power alone can wipe you out in no time. The increases that you see in water and sewer, those kind of things, I don't say wipe out. We got money. I'm not, but it just draws you down enough that you're having to watch. And that's been the biggest challenge for us, is watching the cash flow. We're looking at every week's revenue, every week's expenses to make sure that we're taking care of payroll first. We've been gossiping. We never made the TAN, the revenue anticipation bond, tax anticipation note was not done to make payroll. It was. I've got that, but I got to do it what's on my mind, or I won't remember. So, special fund. You're not supposed to be looking ahead, so shame on you. So I'm not going to give you your little slideshow next time. Okay, so special funds, urban highway maintenance, transit, internal services, pretty straightforward. I'll go through those fast. Urban highway maintenance, we run the whole fund. Look at all the things that we do. Boy, I tell you, if you stop the leaf collection program, the parking lot maintenance, look at all the things Public Works does. They come out and do, special events for us, those kind of things. $2.8 million, nearly entirely run on the state revenue that we receive. That state revenue has bumped up considerably, so it's not a typo on those. It is looking like it's going to be 2.8. We got an increase last year, and it's continued on. So that's helped us in some other things. Will ultimately help us once we're comfortable doing our, because we got to spend it on, we can't just hold the money, we have to spend it. That's why it's restricted. So we ultimately, that's going to take care of some of these sidewalk improvements. Big paving, you see, I bumped paving up $500,000 this year, this upcoming year. We really want to get a lot of paving done. Forest Park is one of our first areas. Pavement up there is getting in rough shape.
But that's not going to, that doesn't mean getting us more paving because it's more expensive. You've talked about asphalt being much more expensive.
Yes.
So that doesn't equal a ton more areas
Yeah,
getting fixed.
5 roads could have been done for $500,000 5, 6, 7 years ago. It may only get you 2 roads this year.
Just
Correct.
wanna make
Yes,
that
yes.
clear.
Inflation, all these numbers are impacted by inflation. Let's just hope inflation heads back the other way. But you can look down through here. We run the entire department on $210,000 for general administration. Most everything is in the work they do on the roads at $1.8 million. And then asphalt's the bigger one. If we're able to do well and the money we have in restricted can go towards the East Main project and go towards sidewalk improvements, it could very well be we could bump up this $500,000 a little bit more and get some additional roads out of it. So just know that we want to try to get roads that have been, they're doing a good job of patching, but our ground moves around so much, you can only go so long. You've got to get, 10 years is getting pretty far along on a road. Storm drainage, this miscellaneous projects all over the place we do for storm drainage, and then salt is $36,000. The public grounds piece, that's the piece that is flower beds and things like that in our public area. So you can see the biggest part of the cost of the public grounds is back over in the general fund because that's in the rec facilities. At one time, the rec department handled all the grounds. We couldn't get enough people, so we moved it over to Public Works because there was so much overlap and they could use the employees for both sides. So the rec department employees work on games and facilities. And I don't know if it was that way when you were there, if you actually mowed or not. I can't remember when we changed that over, but it's been.
We mowed out the lines for the
Yeah,
fields.
and they still do some of that, but we do the broader base. And then, of course, our street lighting piece that's there. Asphalt program, East Main, planning, and ultimately the project are 2 big things for there. Transit fund, that important partnership, $2.8 million, it bounces all over the place. Again, this is one that affects your bottom line, so when you're looking at savings, take a look at what the history has been at that, because if we bought buses last year, it's another $1 million or so over this. Local transportation, capital improvements, partnerships, all those go into that. You can see the breakdown in the revenues. Hope to get a little bit more coming in advertising. The buses have got a great opportunity to advertise. We did have a few advertisements in the past year. Unfortunately, most of them are ours and the university, so we don't get any revenue, but we will put advertisements up for apartment complexes and things like that. You can see the breakdown, DRPT and the state level. We run a big operation, $2.8 million for the city's investment of $198 on the operations side and $67,000 on the capital side. Service contract, the one that runs the system, and I think we talked about this last time, all of the employees under the contract are all the contractor. We don't have a single employee except what Melissa's time is in that area.
Is she the .5?
She's the point. She's a 0.5. I don't know. Don't go by my 0.5 on that because it depends on what day it is. If she's dealing with an accident or something otherwise, her 0.5 has been all over the place lately. So, shop equipment, our management contract, that route study, and then we talked about that classification we're moving because we're smaller from the 5307 to the 5311, which should bring us some more money. Correct? Ultimately.
Yeah, ultimately, if you look at pre-COVID and we've been subsidizing the last few years using some of our ARPA, transit had specific ARPA funding that I had to use for transit, and we subsidized the system for the last few years. So pre-COVID, state and federal percentages were right about 50. Now we're expecting about 70, 75%. So it's bumped up quite a bit.
Internal services, $1 million. Remember, and I'm not going to spend all the time, this is the garage operations, the fuel, auto, everything it takes. All of this is then spread back to all of the other accounts. So while you technically don't really budget for this because it's in the other areas, you still want to see what your costs are. It's the recovered costs from all the different funds, which is, the same equal amount. Fuel purchases is our big one. It's all over the place, and while I was doing this, the fuel's been going up. So I'm hoping this number's still going to hold up, but fuel's going to put 40 cents in the last, 35, 40 cents in the last 3 weeks. Parts, outside repairs. Okay, so that's everything. Now we're going to do a quick budget summary, $79 million. You can see compared to budget, as I said, technically it's fairly level, but when you look, you have to really go to look and see what's driving that. In our 2025, it's that big electric, it's the transit system. You start taking those things out and your number comes way, way down. You can cut out, you can immediately eliminate about $15 million in your costs and get down to what true government operations are minus those big pieces. This slide, just bottom line, is the summary of everything that I've talked about at this point, all the different accounts totaling to the 79, the different funds totaling to 79. I just want to give you a little history without having to look all over your budget book for it.
Back to that, can you go back to that slide real quick? So I just wanted to point out too that some of those years we had to reflect the COVID money and ARPA money, which is why the budgets jumped in some of the years that we had in 22 and 23, and then since that
schools also, the school bonds also.
And since that money's been going away, the electric has really shot up, which is also what's given us the bigger budgets, correct? Because it hasn't
Correct.
been like we've suddenly had.
Oh,
$10
yeah.
million
If you,
new
no,
things.
that's right. No, that's not been plus. It's been included in that. And this is a summary of the rates. The tax at 69 cents. Gave some percentage increases. I don't know if they mean much, but at least gives you a little bit of an idea. 7.8% tax rate issued, not big. Water stays level. Wastewater goes up 14%, which is $2, but for some reason the calculation is 14%. Electric is your bigger jump at 21, and that is strictly the pass through and that base rate, and then keeping sanitation level. This is the side you want to see. So your fund balance reserves, far right. If things go the way we think they're going to go, you can see you'll be back up $2.4 million at the end of next year, hopefully 1.9 by the end of this year. Very conservative on these numbers. Anything can push you more or cause issues. We're really watching closely. We can't think of anything big. I mean, anything big can happen. I mean, you can have weather issue that can do something, but this does move us along pretty well. And you could go $500,000 to $1 million to the good very easily in this.
Can you go back? Because I wanted to say something that I think is important. We talked about these reserves every year. That governmental fund reserves piece was always a concern for us. And we talked about, do we do a tax increase to increase it? Do we continue to do that? 595.
I'm sorry, 3.3 is the unrestricted. I looked all the way at the bottom. I forgot I moved the highway fund to the bottom. That's the restricted fund.
595,000 of the projected, the forecast 2025 reserves is from the 5-cent tax increase. So I just want to point that out. I mean, you can look at it however you want to look at it, but basically having that extra 595,000 takes us from 250 or so thousand up to 913,000. That's what kind of moves us forward. And that's what we've been talking about for several years, but we've never pulled the trigger on that of saying, you know, to really get those reserves up, the only way to really do it is through a tax increase. And so it's one of those, I asked it last year, I asked it the year before, and we kind of said, no, we don't want to do it because we're trying to help people recover through the COVID aftermath and all of that piece. I just wanted to point that out while we were talking about it.
Okay. Can't get into any of this, just remind everybody this is new. We talk about it in different meetings, but I've included a slide on this just so you see a quick summary. The maturity date to the right is the oldest of the bonds, so in the middle of that, like the school debt's actually got a couple of bonds in it that one retires a little bit earlier. Fire truck is just about paid for and goes out in 2 years. Pretty low debt. I mean, we got an $89 million cap and we're only at 33, and that includes with the TAN, and that's the tax and revenue anticipation note. I just didn't want to leave that out. It's not part of our normal calculations because it's almost like one of those old 90-day notes. It's just a temporary thing. So I want.
Still paying, I mean, it's still a huge part of our debt. Why wouldn't we? I mean, I'm glad you included it.
Yeah,
I
but
don't understand why
it's
we
not
did
long. It's not long term. So I want to include that in it as short term. So I wanted to include a slide for that. You know, it was, as I mentioned, it was cash flow challenges. It was not gotten for the budget balancing need. We were looking at revenue streams and the expense planning. We needed it. We want to hold off on essential, to meet all of our goals. We've been holding off on all non-essential spending, held off on filling positions, minimize overtime. All these things have been in place over a year now. So we've been trying to bring the costs down to make sure that the revenues were exceeding the expenses every place possible. All the post-pandemic everything. I mean, that's too much to even list here. It is a short-term note to smooth the ups and downs. We do need to pay. We checked with bond counsel yesterday to make sure. So we want to pay that off in June, but I think you're going to need to reissue it again for a short term. Nothing's going to go long term. I think I may have mentioned a long term at one point. That's not the case. You can either reissue and go to December or reissue to go to June of next year. You're just paying the interest on it during that period of time. We may have the revenues to be able to pay down on it, but I don't want to take everything out of our coffers. We don't want to get in the same spot in July. So sometime in May, we will reissue a request for the $4 million to carry us into the next year, pay off the current, and reissue again.
And is our anticipation to be able to pay that in full in 2025?
I would hope so. I mean, if we go up, what was the number, 3.3 million in reserves?
Yeah.
If we're able to go up again in the next year with that, you should be able to make it.
Well, and I think that that's a point of emphasis.
Or
to
at least pay
build
down,
the
at least pay
reserves.
significantly down.
So that you can, hopefully, you know, I think for a point of emphasis, you know, it's just good governance, and from a personal standpoint, if the house, you know, if I need those funds down the road, that we do have hopefully $4 million in the bank that we can cover something like this. So I think we're headed there, but
I don't disagree, but I wanted folks to understand that we weren't balancing the expenses of paying for personnel and programs for the city on the 5-cent tax increase. That is to increase our reserves. That's what we're trying to do and trying to get there, and that's something we've been talking about for a while, and this happens to be the year we're going to do it rather than spreading it over 3 or 4 or 5 years. Right.
And none of this will be, the debt service is already in there. If we do it, I just included it in the budget already. So it's not something new or something you have to go back and rebudget.
David, so how do we work on the timing? The timing of the receipts? I'm just curious, how do we figure that one out?
So what we do on that is we find out what our revenue is every Tuesday for the previous week. And then we look at all of our expenses for the previous week. And then we make those payments. We're current on everything. As I mentioned, we've been, and the schools know this, we're behind on our school payment, but they've been okay with the extra money that they have. But everything else, we haven't held anything. We've been running about 2 weeks behind on our electric, but it's just the timing of the revenues. But what we have done is we're making sure that if we have, I'll use transit for example, because that's a big number. So if we had $300,000 worth of cost for our operator and whatever parts, we pay that $317,000. Callista and Melissa immediately, almost as soon as the check is issued and you've got the documentation that same week, by Friday, we're filing for DRPT, and we're seeing the money come in less than 10 days, 4 days, 3 days. So that's helped us a lot. Rather than waiting to get a larger amount and filing in 30 days, we've been doing it in shorter periods of time and trying to do that with most all the grants. So that's helped out a lot in cash flow. And then also trying to match up that AEP bill closer to the revenue stream where bills due on the 20th, and usually the revenue, the bills due on the 20th, and usually our revenue stream is coming in like in those few days after. So everything we've been following, we've been watching what comes in and what goes out to match those up as closely as possible. Still tight, but we've had some months where we're bumping. We had some negative months, but overall we've had some positives. So hopefully, with the revenue that may come in June, with the tax, it could be. We see a little bit more of a bump because there's a number of things that are improving. We got Radford University graduation. We've got some other events that are coming up. So hopefully, you're going to start seeing as people are getting out more and more money coming into our economy, and the housing that's. Teton Crest, they're pursuing building permits, everything's in. Did you see any construction over there as you came in? They may have started the ones on Forest.
There's movement on Forest, for sure.
Yes, yes, there is.
So a lot of things going on. So yes, that's how we're watching everything, is checking it, rechecking it, and watching it and we were doing that, but not quite as often because we didn't have really the need a year ago. It's after all those big debt service payments went in. We said, good gracious, that took everything out. And then COVID, had the impact of COVID on top of that.
Okay, thank you.
Does that explain it?
Yes, thank you.
And good communication between Treasurer's Office, you guys?
Email every Tuesday to see how much it is.
Good.
And going forward, they collect the revenue, we take care of the finance and the expense
No
side.
delays on journal entries, things like that? Everything's getting done appropriately? It sounds like you guys have changed.
Trying to get as
time
close,
frames.
yeah. Sometimes the timing of all of them,
I think that
but
was part of one of the many things that was going on, so.
yeah, trying to watch what was coming in. We can only operate on what's on the finance side.
Yes.
Everything gets entered in the finance side. So what comes in cash that's on the treasurer side, we only know that once it gets in over on the finance side. So that's part of the reason we've been trying to track these things. If it's there, but may have not gotten on the finance side, we know we got it to draw from. Does that make sense? Okay. Personnel investments, state's doing 3% COLA, health insurance 9.6. We've got our support to families at 65 to 70%. The training and education I mentioned earlier, safety equipment. Overall, budget highlights, getting to the end here. Trying to be as conservative. Sometimes it doesn't feel conservative, but it is conservative based on the cost of things. Trying to keep it as practically based as possible. Just only purchasing what's absolutely necessary. There's no frills. That truck and trailer is all there is. Oh, and the freezing machine are the only big piece. We could probably get rid of the other and keep the freezing machine. I'll be happy. But the freezing machine and the truck and trailer investments in our infrastructure and facilities, the last thing you want to do is let things go and then somebody else is dealing. I mean, we had to deal with a lot of that since I've been manager, is just trying to get things fixed that needed to be done. Maintain those high-level services, economic opportunity and growth, and just hold expenses. If we don't need to spend something, we're not. And our department heads, kudos to all of them. They do a great job of, if they call and say, I don't think we should be, there's opportunists everywhere in government, especially these days, that somebody comes in and tries to sell something because they know government money's there. So we've been trying to hold off. If something should be $100,000 and they're saying it's $250,000, then we're just not going to get it. We'll just hold off for now. And then there's no new positions. The only positions that are being advertised, somebody says, oh, they're hiring. Well, they're hiring because we're hiring a police officer or a firefighter or an animal control into. We got to have somebody in there to help. Dale can't just walk off and leave the animals, so we got to have the tenant. So it's got to be absolutely needed positions. Just a reminder on Munis, I think y'all have seen it enough now. The category is to the left. It's 5,300 line items. The actual in 23 is the audited number. You have your budgeted number, and then you have your projections, and then off to the right is the manager recommendations. As if you hadn't had enough meetings, tonight is the picking up from the very first slide that we did. that had all the meetings that were going on. This takes the rest of them in, so tonight is the budget presentation. I wasn't sure if y'all wanted to do the meeting tomorrow night or not. I don't know if it's enough time for you to digest this. We maybe just meet early at the council meeting on Monday night, if that, I know you're not there.
Monday, but that was something we had talked about. I mean, does anybody have a desire for meeting tomorrow night? What would we do? Are you going to be able to digest all this and get to other numbers and questions by?
The big meetings, so just make sure you have that public hearing, because that's an odd date because of the timing with the change in the real estate valuation. We had to have the 2-week notice. It's different than normal. So that had to push that public hearing to the 16th. We're being driven by tax tickets and the digest being put together. So the 16th will be the public hearing on the budget and the tax rate, and then the second readings on the 22nd, and then the public hearing on those utility rates. That's where the water and electric are in, and then also those availability.
And we could have a work session
you
in
put
conjunction
something
with
else
the
in if you want
public
to.
hearing if we needed to do that. Can you go back to that slide? Are we going to meet tomorrow?
I'm okay
I
not.
don't think we need to.
No?
I'm not gonna have anything more that I haven't said or already emailed a question about.
Yeah, and
Okay, I need to
please,
think on it a little
please
bit.
email me, call me. Y'all know I'll try to do my best. I'm kind of.
So, I know you won't be here Monday. Do we want to tentatively plan for a work session on Monday?
When you go
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
If you think about it between now and Friday, if not, holler at me next week when you get back.
5:45 Monday or 6 o'clock Monday, 5:45 Monday, in case there's any additional questions?
5:45, so sometime.
Okay, we must have
We've been
talked
back and
about it.
forth. If y'all want to do 5:45, that's fine.
Yeah, I had to stay on for 5:45.
We probably won't do anything. It looks like a fairly short meeting Monday night anyway, so if you do that and your meeting part is, it's some resolutions and what was the other thing that's on there? Public hearing.
Yeah.
Joint public hearing on the RV part. Okay, so we'll take the meeting off, we'll update the website. Everything is on the website as far as advertising goes for both the rate and the budget. We will put the budget, we'll go on there tomorrow, so anybody can look at the budget. I'd like for you all to get it first, and then we will have the meetings updated, reflecting tonight's conversation. You have a little pile of stuff in front of you that includes your, Kelly, show me what you have. You should have the budget.
Adding capital improvement.
Capital improvements. There are no
program. We've got the
improvements
school
next
board
year.
budget, which I sent a question on. We've got the slides from today. If anybody wants to
And
look
this.
at the, I still can't think of the word of this, it's driving me nuts.
The debt service.
Yeah, there's a different word. Yeah.
David,
And then you've got your equipment replacement, which, like I said, it's only that one thing,
Yeah,
so
and
we're
our
good.
budget, and then notice of public hearing.
yeah,
And you all had your agency report from last time, so the only thing that changed, I took out the things that we've talked about up to now. So everything in these books now reflects everything that we have talked about for the last 2 months.
Including the COLA as well.
COLA's out, yeah.
Was that
The
allocated into
state
the
COLA's
reserves?
in there.
Right, with the other portion, was that, did you allocate that to the reserves? Was that part of the 913?
It all
of
goes
forecast?
into, yeah, it all goes into the total.
Okay, yeah, I was just.
Across all
looking at this.
departments, so it's not only general fund, but it's all
That's
the
right,
other funds as
that's right.
well.
That's, yeah, thank you.
Yep. It takes quite a team to decipher all my stuff, and they've done super. I couldn't do it without them, so we even had our intern trying to put she's never seen my writing before, so she was quite the challenged person. She did a great job. Melissa, Juanita, all the department heads, everybody has been helpful, supportive, everything. Callista, Dawn, couldn't do it without you all refining and fixing all those numbers, and Casey, it helps Callista. It's taken a full team. I'm probably missed somebody, but all the departments have been fantastic, knowing the position we're in, trying to give ideas. Heck, some of them come up with some great ideas. That's part of where the revenue generation for the availability fees and all came from. They said, hey, we're the lowest one around, and it's costing us more to do it. Why not put it in? I hope everybody's enjoying our mural. We used it a lot in this.
Looks great.
So, a lot, and I apologize. This is the longest budget presentation y'all have ever had. It's got the most information that you've ever had. I'm tired. If I've stumbled along, please let me know if there's something missing or something more. I hope I have covered all the questions you all get, all the questions that I hear, all the concerns that you have. Hopefully they're all there. It's tough to, we're trying to run run a 2025 community, and you got to be able to run it on 2025 goals and opportunities and
Dollars.
There's tons of things that affect what we do. It's not things that we're causing or doing. It's the outside influences. If you find something else you'd rather do without, let me know. I've combed it so many times now. I think we run a pretty tight ship. So,
So
any questions?
I do have one more question. So
Oh,
the very
gosh.
last, sorry.
I can't
The
decide.
very last column of this vehicle equipment list has a due for replacement
Yes.
years.
Yes, don't pay attention to that because we haven't,
Wow.
we've done our best, but I have not put, if it says a replacement like for this
There's a
year,
bunch of stuff that says 2024.
we have
some
reevaluated
2025.
and some, I forgot, there is a tractor, a mower in there. I don't remember if it's on the general fund, public works side, or on the public works side, that I forgot. So I'm glad you said that, but that is it. So if it says replacement, two things have happened. One, we've reevaluated the piece of equipment. We know we can get a little bit longer because some of the garbage trucks are lasting longer, things like that. Don't get too hung up in it.
Okay.
If it is really getting to be junk, it's going surplus. Y'all will see a surplus list probably in May that has an old garbage truck and brush machine, things like that. But we've been trying to keep up with the good stuff. The street sweeper was kind of the last thing that we were replacing stuff on it constantly. So you'll see the new machine that's on the cover out, and it's going to be cleaning every right of way, getting the gravels picked up and all that kind of stuff, grass in the
Well,
roads,
maybe you
all
could
that.
save me an email and give me the things that we think we're gonna replace, because there's a lot of things on here that have that. I just would like to know.
Pick a mower, pick a truck, pick a trailer. That's it.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
So ignore that other column, because we're only gonna get those things.
Yeah, that's just to give you an idea. It is
Unless
deferred.
something
It is a
breaks.
deferred cost unless something breaks. Yeah. And like the digger derrick, as we mentioned, is 2026. So even though it's saying it's due, it'll be 2 years before it comes. So we're trying to plan out enough
Okay.
on that. We don't have any big things like garbage trucks and things like that. Public Works, the thing that's helped us the most in Public Works has been the fact that we haven't had snow. So
Knock on wood.
yeah, it's supposed to be
What are
really
you
cold later this week, but usually that's the hardest thing on your trucks and plows, and we bought some extra plows and salt machines a few years ago that we kept in storage that we've been able to use, and we have been able to keep our storage bins. So the $36,000 you see in ice, rock salt, we probably not gonna need to spend all that. We filled up the bin, and if we don't have
Now
any,
that you said it, we're gonna have 75
I want a
feet of
little
next
snow.
year.
I like a little bit, so,
Yeah,
I want
I
one
like
good
a
one or
little
two.
bit.
Yeah, I want one or two good
I'm
snows.
real happy when we don't have it. and
Did
we
it
get to
snow?
save
It
our
didn't snow
money.
at all, did it? It
We
dusted
had
one time.
snow, but I don't think it was even one you needed to do that much with.
Didn't count.
Thank you all for your endurance. Thank you for your patience in working with me over the last several months and getting all of this together. It's a lot. Thank you for support. We're going to get through it. Our community is going to be fine. Radford's always strong. It always does well. Our citizens and our community, are together, and we've got a lot of good positive development things going. A lot of positive in our community. We got a fun-filled summer with some concerts, and I guess the farmers market starts up next week. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. So a lot of good things headed our way, and we go from there. Whatever happens at this point, just know that the electric you're looking at is generally trying to take in cogen, so don't get too alarmed about that, because there ultimately will be that cost for standby power that will come into that. But all of our utility providers for electric know that the university will come off, so those rates are based on what Radford's new electric wattage will be.
And that was something I wanted to make sure is that while we're anticipating that and if the standby power, are we also preparing for worst case scenario? Maybe we don't get as much as we want. All
Yep.
that's built in. Okay.
Yep. We're trying to best with electric. Like I said, those big swings in numbers, hard to
3
plan
years
on
ago,
worst
I don't
case,
think
but we
we
look.
thought we'd be anywhere close to where we are with electric right now.
Yeah.
And the university
I
will
would
still
never guess
purchase water,
this big a
correct?
jump. Huh?
They still purchase water, will continue to
Oh,
purchase
yeah.
water, correct?
Yep. They don't process anything on campus.
Right.
And this is something, we do get a little fee from natural gas sales.
Oh, yeah, that's those consumer utility
And
taxes.
the university will be firing the plant with natural gas. So that's an unknown what that will look like at this point in time. There's just a lot of big giant question marks on that. because
cover it
that
all.
was something that we talked about last year, as that could end up giving us money. We don't know how much, but that's one of those we're not sure about.
Okay, that's a lot. I can't think of anything else. I'm
Less than 3
done.
hours.
So, yeah. So hit a little less than 3 hours. Please send me any questions you may have, especially with help you be ready for whenever we have our next meeting for the public hearing. And
When you reply to any questions, will you just reply to all of
yeah,
us?
usually anything I see that may help everybody, I try to get it out to all you guys.
Okay.
And I've got a couple in my notes that will follow back around on. So if you think of something different you want, the reason we didn't do any business comparisons is every daggone business is different. So it's based on employees, it's based on the size of the factory, it's based on what they do, the number of bathrooms they have. There was no rhyme or reason, and I didn't want to get it narrowed down so much you could figure out. We want to be respectful of our businesses too, that you can't figure out exactly what their costs and rates and things like that are. So just know that usually you're looking at what its impact on the resident. So hopefully that's helpful. Thank you. Good night.
Anything else?
Thank you, David. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And I'm not used to this not being able to wander around. I like to walk. I kept forgetting I had it. I kept staying over there.